Yeah, good to go.
Okay, very good. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm calling to order the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission public hearing at 5:03 p.m. on Thursday, February 19th, 2026. My name is Mark Kiefer. I'm the chairman and joined this evening by Commission Vice Chair Arian Allen, as well as Commissioners Feingold, Steele, and I think we are still waiting for Commissioner Jackson, but he is scheduled to join us as far as we know, and so we'll acknowledge him when he joins. Today, the commission will be holding a public hearing to review applications in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the subsequent amendments. We're conducting this meeting online, which is a Zoom, and to ensure public access to deliberations of the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission, the public may access this through a hearing through telephone and video conferencing, that is Zoom. As if you didn't catch it, the hearing is being recorded, so all further conversations between commissioners should be audible to the public in attendance until the hearing is adjourned. At this point, we'd like to acknowledge any media or elected officials present. I see Dan Murphy from the Beacon Hill Times. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining. Anyone else? Just quickly, we got a lot of folks in the Zoom here, so forgive us if we miss anyone. I don't see anyone else. We'll certainly acknowledge them if we find them. I think that's it. Okay. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. We're going to do that for each application that we adjudicate. We'll let you know when it's time to take public comments. So we'll give you a heads up. And at that point, if you do want to be heard on the record, you will need to raise your hand, quote unquote, not just like this, but to use the button that's probably at the bottom of your Zoom panel on your screen that says raise hand. And then Nick is, there it is. There's some nice handy instructions on the screen. Nick will need to unmute you. So just make sure you get that hand up and then he'll call on you and unmute you in turn. Let's see. Just a couple of other housekeeping items. We do have a long agenda tonight, not necessarily indicated by the number of items, but there's a quite significant proposal that's last on the agenda for 155, 159 Charles Street. It's a large project that's been quite some time in the making, and I'm sure there'll be lots of interest in that. It will take probably a significant amount of time to go through it. I'm not sure we'll necessarily be approving it tonight, but I just want to give you a heads up in two regards. One is that I'm going to try to get us through the first part of the agenda as quickly as possible. We'll, of course, still take public comment and deliberate each application carefully, and commissioners just chime in if I'm going too fast at any point. Or if we want further discussion. But we're also going to be having a 5-minute recess in between just before 155 to 159 Charles, that last large application, just to give us a little bit of break beforehand. I suspect we'll need it by then. But again, we'll try to get there as quickly as possible. If there are a lot of folks who want to be heard on the record with respect to that proposal, we will likely implement our usual time limit, 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how many people are here. So just keep that in mind and maybe thinking of what you might want to say as succinctly as possible. And with that, we'll get to the agenda. First on the agenda is ratification of the January 15, 2026 public hearing minutes. Anyone have, commissioners, any comments, edits, revisions, concerns about the January minutes?
No comment.
No comment.
Do we have a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve.
Do we hear a second?
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the January 2026 minutes. We'll vote. Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold?
Aye.
Has Commissioner Jackson joined us yet? I don't believe so.
Don't see him.
Okay, Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele? Sandy, I think, is muted. I saw her before. She should be here. Yes, can you unmute Sandy? Nick.
Got it. Sandy, you should be able to unmute yourself. Okay.
Sandy?
Yes,
Commissioner
I know.
Steele. Okay, Commissioner Steele, how do you vote? Sandy, you're muted again. Sandy, Commissioner Steele, can you hear us? You're muted again. Okay, well, Nick, we've got 3 votes in the affirmative here, so I think we'll just consider the motion passed. The
think that's
January
fine.
22, sorry?
I think that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so the January minutes are approved, so moving on to design review. First item on the agenda is, I think it's 4 Lime Street. Yes, as a representative from 4 Lime Street. Is that Tim Pingree, I think? Yes, there he is.
You should be.
Can you hear me now? They can't hear me.
Yes, Sandy, we can hear you now.
Oh, good. All right, fine.
Yes, Sandy, we can hear you.
Oh, good.
Oh, there's a bit of an echo, though.
I know.
Oh,
Okay, Sandy, can you mute yourself for the moment?
yeah.
That might cure it.
Okay. got it.
Okay, Mr. Pingree, you're representing 4 Lime, is that right?
Yes, I'm
you wanna
representing
just-
Maggie and Josh Leffler.
Great, thanks for coming in. Do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you're proposing?
Yes, we are proposing to change the color of the primary and secondary front entrance doors and the shutters, which are actually not shown in this image, but the shutters on all of the windows on the second and third story, which are black to Amish green.
Okay, and you've submitted a paint chip in the application, which we have seen. There it is. Thanks very much, Nick. And we have vetted this, I believe. So this building is built early 19th century, right? Sorry, 20th century.
Correct.
So we're talking either arts and crafts or colonial revival. As it turns out, this color is appropriate for either of those styles, according to the Historic New England color chart. Nick, and you've verified this as well?
Yeah, it was actually me that made the recommendation to Josh. So
There we go. Very good. So one more time, Tim, if we can go back to the image of the facade, forgive me. I think I saw this in the application, but it's not the door surround, right?
Correct. The door. Just, yeah, so the windows and the windows remain black, and the shutters, which are off of the upper windows in this image, you can see them on 2 shutters on the lower windows, those as well as the secondary door on the right and the primary door within the vestibule on the left.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Any other clarifying questions as to what's proposed?
Lori? I don't know. Now I'm,
Okay, let's go ahead and take public comment. Commissioners, we can jump back in if we need to afterwards. Let's go ahead and take public comment. Again, if you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in your Zoom using the button at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and Nick will unmute you.
okay, first up we have is Rochelle with the Civic Association. Rochelle, go ahead.
Figaro Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed, as the paint color historically appropriate for the time period of this house and satisfies guideline G1. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. All right, and I am not seeing any other public comment, Mark, so we can close it for this application and turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rochelle. Commissioners, I'm fine with this. Seems to comport with the guidelines and how we normally treat these kinds of things appropriate for the building in this period. Anyone have a different point of view?
Yes,
Go ahead, Commissioner Feingold.
I'm just puzzled how it's going to look with black windows and black trim or somewhere else on the ground floor with dark green doors and shutters. I think that's kind of strange. Do we have those kind of combinations elsewhere in the district?
Yeah, certainly. We have the reverse, which is quite common, even right across the street, of course, where you have dark shutters and light sashes and so forth. But I
Mhm, yeah.
believe, I think anyway, yeah, just 2 doors down from this house, you have an even more stark contrast. I don't know if we can go out to Google Maps. If you look just to
Okay.
the right, not the, yeah,
Okay, as long as there's precedence, fine.
yeah, it's not,
Thank you. No, I won't belabor it.
okay. Yeah, more the exception than the rule, but certainly something you see.
I think it's just weird.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, and hearing none, I will move that the application be approved as submitted.
I second it.
Okay, we'll vote. Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Feingold,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Is Commissioner Jackson on yet? I don't see him still.
I don't think he's here.
Okay, Commissioner Steele,
She's
you're
muted.
muted. Sandy? Sandy's still muted. Sandy, can you unmute yourself?
I'm trying to.
Oh, there we go.
I'm trying to. Oh, I did it.
Okay, Commissioner
Yeah,
Steele.
aye. Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much, Tim. You'll get a letter from Nick confirming our determination. If you have any questions, please follow up with him directly. Thanks.
Wow, that's
Okay.
a long time.
Next is 70 Charles Street. Let's see, I think that's Don Mills and Beth Colt. I think I saw Beth on here somewhere. There she is. Hi, Beth. Hi, Don.
Hello,
Hey,
thank you
welcome.
for having us.
Thanks for coming in. Do you want to give us, we have the application, of course, but you want to just give us a very brief summary of what's proposed?
Sure, I'm just the owner's rep here, and I'm going to turn it over to Don Mills as the architect.
Thanks, Beth. If I could share my screen, Nick, if I could go through things, but the brief summary that you asked, Mark, would be that the central doors on the Charles Street facade that have been in their current configuration since the adaptive reuse project in 1980 to create street level retail were recently refused a building permit, even though there was no change proposed, based on the Tate Cafe expansion. The permit refusal was on 2 points, one of which is the doors swing out over the public way, and the other is that they have no panic hardware. You received and approved in mid-January administratively a proposal to add panic hardware, but to keep the outswing doors in their current configuration. So we had your blessing and went back to ISD, and they said they wouldn't oppose doing that, but they weren't not comfortable supporting it, or rather approving it without building code appeal board approval, which can take anywhere from 60 to 90 days. And it's a panel of 3 people, and no one
Speak
ever
up,
wants,
please.
no one ever wants to go to the building code appeal board if you can avoid it. So we looked at an alternative of recessing the doors so they still swing out, but don't encroach on the public way. And that's what we're coming back to you for now. The conversation with ISD is not over yet, because Nicholas and Joe both met with ISD, and they seemed amenable to approving what we had proposed initially, but we just haven't heard back from them. So the reason we're here tonight is to show another alternative to see if that would be approved by you. Even if it's preferred by you, we won't wait for ISD any longer, and we'll go with it. So we can go through the slides if you'd like, or if you have any questions, or if
Yeah, please. Looks like
okay.
you've got the con now, Don, so you can share your screen, I think.
Okay, great. So you see this historic image from the Boston Public Library in 1853?
Yes.
Okay, so the building was built in 1807, became the African Meeting House, and it was the Third Baptist Church, which interestingly was a segregated congregation, and a guy who brought some African Americans to attend church with him was expelled, which gave birth to the Tremont Temple Baptist Church. Long story short, it was transferred over to the Charles Street Meeting House in 1939, was sold to a private person in 1979, and converted by John Sherratt Architect into mixed-use street-level retail, upstairs offices, and a tower residence in 1980. The proposal is based on the fact that the Tate is expanding, and ISD sees that as an increase in occupant load. They haven't recognized the fact that it was a church before, so it would have had a much greater occupant load in the past. But that's part of what we've been talking to them about. I won't go through this letter, which is to you. If you've read it, you'll know that I'll go through the contents of it as we proceed. The building refusal, as I mentioned, was the doors don't have panic hardware, and that they encroach on the public way.
And Don, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to be clear for the public and for the commission, the doors in question are not the main entrance doors at the bottom of the tower, but the ones on Charles Street.
That's right.
That enter the retail space, right?
Yeah, they serve only the retail shops.
Right,
of which there
Sorry.
have been 4 since 1980, and now there will be 2 left.
right, right.
Tate's taking over 2 of the retail spaces, and the clothing store Kodomo is remaining.
Right.
So
Okay.
they have nothing to do with the offices and the accessible entrance around the corner into the former residence. So it's only it's a second means of egress for Tate, and it's a sole means of egress for Kodomo.
And you got an image of what we're talking about, just to orient us.
Yeah, well, you will wish you hadn't asked.
Right.
So historically, this is the oldest photograph that we found. The Charles Street facade entrance is right here in the middle. It's the middle of that 5-bay facade. That opening has always been a door opening. And we believe that the doors were more recessed than they are now. You can see this deeper jamb here. You can't tell with certainty whether that jamb is brick or wood. We assume it was brick. But you can tell by looking at the edges of the windows that the doors were deeper than the windows. More recent image from 1937 shows the doors above, and the current image below that's been in place since 1981. The former doors had a transom. This is a 1971 photograph with a zoom in showing a transom above, and the transom bar is in the same plane as the doors. So the doors have always swung out. These doors could not swing in because there'd be no stop when they were swinging back into place. So the outswing door is a historic feature. This shows a very shallow recess at the brick. There's a 4-inch recess in each main facade panel to the windows and doors. But unlike the 1889 photograph, this shows that the door frame appeared to have been moved forward some. The existing elevation of the current doors is here. The brick surrounds a pair of 3-panel doors swinging out. They have very wide, long throw hinges so that they clear the facade and lean against the facade. The proposal we have for what's visible from a public way is to remove a metal astragal that keeps the doors from being simultaneously opened, to change out a lock cylinder that's currently stainless steel. I'll show you a picture of that, and to add 2 Baldwin cabin locks. This would all be in black, and to replace the hinges in black, recess the doors, and have them swing out. I have plan views of that as well. The current contemporary views are here. Again, they've been in this position since 1981. The reason we made an argument about egress, although we agreed to add panic hardware for ISD, is that the doors are open once in the morning by staff before the shops are open, and closed once at night, again by staff, before the doors are closed. So in terms of them swinging over a public way, it's not a life safety issue. It's not that the doors are constantly swinging out and taking pedestrians with them. So that's why ISD seemed amenable to possibly approving it. On the upper left is that current lock. On the right is the deadbolt on the inside. There's currently one active leaf, the one with the lock, and one inactive that has a foot bolt. And there are remnants of former head bolts as well that used to go all the way up to the head. There's a large rubber bumper on each side that we'll remove if we recess the doors. We'll keep them if we get approval from ISD to retain what's already been improved. The lower left shows a view from inside. It's a very deep wall. Recessing the doors would bring the jambs in a bit in order for the doors to not swing onto the public way. On the lower right is just showing, it's a similar egress condition, but without the closers, the exit devices, and the security contacts, but just horizontal black exit devices and vertical rods. We wouldn't do the lower rods. And then on the upper part here would be a cylinder on the outside, solid that would be there. We do it in black. And then a pair of Baldwin cabin locks that are on a swivel that would also be in a satin black. The current plan shown above shows how the doors swing out and parallel with the exterior wall. This with the added panic hardware is what we requested of ISD. The one below is if they don't approve the one above, we would recess the doors deeper into that door area, not changing the masonry opening, but we would have the option of restoring brick jambs if in fact they were exposed brick before, or retaining or modifying the wood if they weren't. A good comment from Beacon Hill Civic Association was being more like the more recent photographs where you can see that the wood frame is closer to the front edge and not recessed, as the 1889 drawings seem to show. And that could match with the windows on each side aren't detailed here, but they have fairly shallow recesses to the wood as well. We did include a description of specs here, which I won't go into. And we have a photograph. I mean, we have a support from Historic New England, who has a preservation restriction in perpetuity on the project. On the building. At one point, actually, they owned the building in 1947 until 1979 when it was sold. The alternative that we drew to the recessed doors when we discussed things with Beacon Hill Civic Association was to retain or modify the wood jambs rather than remove them and run the risk of exposing brick that may have never been exposed. And so this is an alternative that's not directly what we had initially submitted, but responds to the Beacon Hill Civic Association's comments. So
Okay,
that's-
thanks, Donna. One clarifying question on that. When you said a moment ago, you have these sort of two variants, maybe it's even three, including this one. And you could sort of pick the one based on whether the exposed brick jam was original or retain the wood if it wasn't. How would you purport to or plan to confirm that or affirm that one way or the other?
So what we would do is if this original approach, which we prefer because it's been that way since 1980, were not allowed by ISD without going to the Building Code Appeal Board, we would need to modify the wood in this area because the door rabbet would need to be back in deeper. So we would cut the wood out here to see what the brick is like underneath it. And then
okay. So
is that original face brick, or was
Yeah.
it always just a minimalist return like this? And you
Right.
could make a decision at that point. We've told H&E, and we can tell you as well, that based on what's approved by you and or by ISD, we will explore this further and present details before we actually do the work.
Okay, and we could always have a proviso in our determination that would make it subject to that determination, perhaps to be confirmed with staff and so forth, which
right.
might obviate the need to come back.
Right.
And that'd be my preference. I would just signal right now. Okay, commissioners, thank you very much, John, for that, as usual, very thorough presentation. I have a good sense of what is proposed here, but commissioners, any more clarifying questions before we take public comment?
I'm good.
Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and do that. Again, if you want to be heard on the record, now is the time for public comment. Please raise your hand with your Zoom button, and Nick will unmute you in turn.
Okay, first up is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed, as the door configuration is not historic and the application satisfies guideline A3 with regard to new work. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle.
I'm sorry, Michelle, I missed that. It was interrupted. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. We do not oppose this application as proposed, as the door configuration is not historic and the application satisfies guideline A3 with regard to new work. End of comment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. And I don't see any other public comments through email or in the call here. So back to you, Mark.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you, Rochelle. For what it's worth, commissioners, I went down and looked at this. As Rochelle said, and not to put words in her mouth, but the opening here, the wood jambs that Don is referring to are quite simple. There's nothing particularly ornamental. There's no real molding profiles or anything like that. So it's quite utilitarian in its construction. The hinges that are there now are actually kind of awkward, I dare say, because they're these long throw hinges. It's a little hard to see from here, but there's a big space between the door and the jamb, so it can make it around that corner, because it's got to open all the way around out to the face of the building. So aesthetically, at least to my mind, yeah, thank you, Nick, or John, whoever just zoomed that in. I think this could be an improvement, if anything, on what's there now. Not that it's to say that it's at all bad now, but it's just I'm not concerned that there's any particularly significant historic fabric that would be lost in the process on the one hand, or architectural features, that would be reduced or eliminated in the process. If Don were to determine that originally this jamb was brick, again, it might even reflect an improvement from a historic perspective as well. So I think it's architecturally appropriate, probably historically appropriate, and maybe even we might find ourselves with a historical improvement along the way.
Okay. I propose to approve as submitted.
Oh, no, I have comment.
Oh, what's the
Oh,
comment?
my goodness, no.
Go ahead, Mo. Commissioner Feingold.
Yes. I object to this particular proposal. I don't see, can we go back to the alternative? The new one that's proposed, repositioning the existing doors. Would the applicant tell me, could you actually, is that a true dimension of the leaf? The leaf does not project at all into the public way when open?
That is the true projection of the leaf. This is a measured drawing.
Yeah, well, okay, thank you. I'm impressed, because that is the way it should be. The idea is that the doors swing out once a day, and that's fine for now, but when it's commercial, when the commercial ownership changes and there's something else, and the doors are opening and closing, you have doors just swinging into the public way. This is a permanent solution, repositioning the existing doors, and I support that. I don't support any of the others.
Well, no, that's what I was supporting, Mo. So you're agreeing with what I was saying.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay,
Mo,
Okay, Arian, thank you.
no
Mo,
worries.
can I, for both of you, this is quite helpful. Mo, I believe this is a further refinement to Don's original proposal. So just backing up a step, right now, the doors open out, as we know, and they open, as we saw, all the way out onto the facade.
Right.
And so if we go down just a little bit in this diagram, right? And Mo, you're saying you don't love that. So the original proposal is just below. If we can scroll down a little bit, Don, thank you.
Now, this is the current proposal. The one above this was approved administratively with the addition of panic hardware.
Yeah, I mean, this exists now. Just to be clear, what was approved administratively is the addition of the panic hardware, right?
That's right.
And
if
the
I
doors
could
are like that
clarify-
now. They've been like that now
clarify,
for years.
Mark, if I could
Yeah.
just clarify, there is no opposition to dismissing that prior application if you prefer this new approach. Because
why does ISD object to this?
they haven't seen this.
Okay.
There would be no objection to this.
Oh, well, why don't you do it?
That's why we're here.
Yeah, Don, just and to further clarify for Commissioner Feingold, the reason there's two variants of this is in the one above. If you go back up, the code permits 4 inches into the public way, which is what you see on the bottom there.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
So that's a 4-inch protrusion there into the public way, Mo, which is the max allowed under the code.
Okay.
And then the further refinement, which Don has got here, would be 0, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, so does the proposal stand, or do we need a second?
So one point of clarification, Nick, this one we're looking at right now is a further alternative that's been offered, but is not formally in the application.
The application was to modify the placement of the doors, so either would be fine. I
just want to make sure and not to speak for Commissioner Feingold, we should clarify this, but if Commissioner Fine, I am comfortable with either the one we're looking at or the one that protrudes 4 inches.
Mhm.
So I think we just need a proviso to make clear that either of the options are okay.
I thought the point was they came to us with a modification. My proposal was to go with the modification, since it's something that's not gonna be rejected by the other agency. Are we not going along with that, or are we? What's the stance?
Okay, Don, is there any issue with respect to doing this one versus the other one?
Well, the issue with the 4-inch projection is that while it does comply with the both the ADA and the Architectural Access Board allowing up to 4 inches in an accessible path, I think that ISD would still have to approve it because it is technically swinging over a public way by 4 inches. Even though
Okay.
it conforms to accessibility standards and these doors currently aren't in motion ever, except when handled by staff. I mean, I tend to agree with Commissioner Feingold that this is the best permanent solution right here. And because we still get adequate strike site clearance on the doors inside the vestibule, we've maintained accessible entrances to both retail operations. So I think, you know, all told, this is the one that gets us away from any more issues or discussions with ISD, which I
All
think
right,
is in the interest.
so just to clarify, because I feel like we're kind of going around circles. I'm agreeing with you on this, on the one that's gonna get us away from another agency having an issue with it. I thought that was clear that that you came in with a modification. So that's what I'm saying. I'm, proposing that we approve as proposed, meaning the modification. Isn't that the point of this meeting?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Arian, the
Okay.
fine point here is that this was not
Alright.
in this was not in the application. It's just the other one that was in the application. So we just need to make
But this was
clear.
modified to the application, correct?
Yeah, but you said as submitted. If you said as submitted, this
Okay.
wasn't submitted.
Okay.
I'm fine with approving this further revision. We just need to make it clear that we're talking about that one.
Well, Mark,
Okay.
Mark, there is a comment here in my note with the one with the forged projection. I said, or no protrusion if mandated by SD. So we already had that no protrusion option built into the application as submitted.
Okay, Arian, would you be okay with a friendly amendment that simply clarifies that it's the no protrusion
I think
option?
that it would be best at this point if you do the if you do it and I can second you, or just to kill confusion.
Okay, does anyone have a problem with this version, the 4-inch projection? Because I'd like to give them the liberty to do both if they wind up needing to.
We don't want to make this overcomplicated.
I object.
You don't want the 4 inches,
No.
Mo. Okay, well, Arian, your motion is still on the table here, so you need to withdraw it if you want me to make a new one.
Yes, please withdraw my motion. Thank
Okay,
you.
I move that the application be approved as submitted with the proviso that the design reflect the no protrusion modification offered at the meeting, and that a final design be submitted to staff prior to construction. Okay, is that a second, Mo?
Yes, sir.
Don, does that make sense to you? You know what we're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. It's been moved and seconded to approve the application with the no protrusion revision as submitted at the hearing. We will vote. Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold?
Aye.
Is Commissioner Jackson here yet? I don't think so. Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. The motion passes. It's approved. Don and Beth, thank you very much for coming in and for your thorough and thoughtful presentation. You'll get a letter from Nick confirming our determination. If you have any questions, as usual, just follow up with him directly. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mr. Mills.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Next is 43 Bowden. Is there a representative from 43 Bowden? Which is, let's see.
Hi, this is Derek Bloom. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi. Well,
Hi,
welcome.
how are you? Sorry, I was
Good.
muted
Thanks for coming in.
early, but I'm in now.
Do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you're proposing?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Derek Bloom from Bloom Architecture. I'm here with Scott Simonson of Charles Gate, representing the ownership. 43 vote into the project. It's essentially an interior project that's been going on for a while to convert what was commercial space on the basement first and part of the second floor into residential space. So now the building is entirely residential. We're here before you because we had a piece of equipment fail in the mechanical room that was unvented, and in replacing it, we need to vent the new version of it, which is a domestic hot water tank. So we're here primarily to show you our proposed vent location so that we can bring fresh air to the basement mechanical room below. As a secondary item, I believe Kelly Robbins from Charles Gate sent Nick a picture of a strobe that has since gone in, a fire beacon for the fire department. So I wanted to show you that too, which is not in the application, but
we can't review that tonight. We have to advertise it to the public. You're going to have to resubmit the application.
Okay, yep.
We can discuss it offline.
Sure. So in terms of the vent, here it is. So the alcove today, it's a brick building. The alcove has wood paneling and stained wood doors. The mechanical room's location is to the right beneath where we're proposing the vent, what's 1 story below. So the path that we can get to the front or to the outside that doesn't involve brick is this alcove, which is a recessed entryway. As you can see on the left picture, there's the ceiling joists are actually in the unit, or the ceiling framing in the unit is kind of where that dashed line is. So that does push it down below the center of the panel, but left to right, proposing to center it. The size is 6 by 6. We're proposing wood, and we would paint it to match the paneling itself.
Okay, so it's shown as a little bit brighter white, which is actually helpful to see it, but the idea is you just paint it in that same color.
Exactly. We wanted you to be able to see it in the presentation because it's sort of small, but yeah, it will match. I mean, it's hard to match the dirt, but,
Right.
but I think when the paneling gets a fresh coat of paint, it'll all be one color.
Okay. Very good. Any other clarifying questions, commissioners, before we take public comment? Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Again, if you want to be heard on the record, make a public comment, please raise your hand using the button on your Zoom, and Nick will unmute you.
Okay. First up is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association. We do not oppose this application, but would like to see more detailed shop drawings and material specifications before this exception to guideline A9 is approved. End of comment.
Thanks, Rochelle. Mark, I'm not seeing any other public comment for this application, so we can turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks. We'll close public comment. Yeah, this is, I mean, it seems relatively innocuous. There's, and it sounds like it's going to be really innocuous compared to a fire beacon that's going to go in there that we know we don't have much control over. The applicant has made an effort at least to make it blend in by painting it. I don't think we want to make a habit of something like this, but it sounds like there's not a lot of alternatives for this. So I think I'm okay with it. Civic Association sounds like they're okay with it, but I agree that we want at least some kind of shop drawing that specifies the dimensions and so forth and materials, at least before we would.
Yes, we there was some problem with the portal. Scott, are you able to speak? I can't tell if Scott is.
We don't need that now, Derek. We would just want it before you install it.
He had attempted to put it on the portal prior to advertisement, and I'm just not clear whether it did or didn't get there because there was some portal trouble.
Okay. Yeah, we can run that to ground.
I mean, I have it tonight, but if it has to be submitted,
no, it wouldn't hold it up. We want it for the file, and just to, honestly, candidly, we want to make sure after the fact that you did what you said you were going to do, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
To be clear, just so everybody's aware, applications have to be complete 15 days prior to submittal or to posting. And then I have 10 days after that to post the agenda and notify the public of all the changes. So I can't just add things because we need them. So I have to follow the letter of the law. So that's where we are right now. Mark?
We will definitely follow the letter of the law. This was submitted for the January meeting hearing, and we got mixed up on dates. So we will totally comply as we have with all previous applications. Just I don't know why we were experiencing issues on this one.
Okay. Let's see, commissioners, any further thoughts, views on this? Anyone have a problem with it?
No.
Okay, I will move that the application be approved as submitted with the proviso that a shop drawing detailing the exact dimensions, materials, and colors be submitted to staff as soon as possible and prior to any construction.
Second.
Okay, we'll vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Mr. Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the application is approved. Thanks very much to you both for coming in. You got a letter from Nick summarizing the determination. Please do get that additional material to Nick as soon as you can, as soon as possible, and follow up with him with any questions. Thanks.
Will do. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Okay, next is 20 Charles. Is there a representative from 20 Charles, which is
Our friend Babak.
is that Babak? I think I saw Babak.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi, Babak. How are you? Is it just you or is there someone else?
No, I'm Adam from SRP Signs. Yeah,
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you both for coming in. You want?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Do you want to just give us a brief summary of what you are proposing?
Yes. Sorry, Adam, did you want to go? Yeah. It's Please.
Do I have to share my screen? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So this is going to be a carved redwood sign, about a foot by almost 5 foot. The border there would be raised, and the text would be recessed carved. It's about 1.5 inches thick, and it's just going to go over the existing storefront windows. There's towards the end of this package is a rendering of what that would look like.
Okay, very good. And just to clarify, Adam and Babak, while you're showing the storefront repainted, this application deals specifically just with the sign, where conveniently the cursor is pointing right now.
That's correct. Unfortunately, we failed to include the colors in the original application and didn't meet the guidelines for the 10 days. And so we've resubmitted consideration for the painting at the next hearing, hopefully.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And just to clarify, because I think it still says, because this might have been the materials that were submitted earlier, it uses the word acrylic up here, but Adam, just to confirm, the whole sign will be made of wood, is that right?
Yes, yep, we'll make everything out of wood.
Great, okay.
The acrylic was from a previous design.
Right, that was my one concern here. Okay, commissioners, any clarifying questions before we take public comment? Okay, okay, Mo, do you have a comment or question before we take public comment?
No, so I just was curious what it was before Willie's.
That's
upper crust
pizza.
Huh?
Upper crust.
Yeah.
Oh, they're gone?
They're gone.
No, okay.
But you're gonna love this one.
Yeah, it'll have pizza, Mo, just so you know. Let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and take public comment. If you already heard on the record, make a public comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom using the button on your Zoom panel, and Nick will unmute you.
Okay, first up is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hills Civic Association. We do not oppose the new signage provided the proposed acrylic border is changed to wood to meet guideline I6, which requires excellent quality and durability. The new signage does satisfy guideline I7 for appropriate attachment method and relationship to the size of the shop front. End of comment.
Okay, I think that's all the comments we have. Oh, let me just double check. I know I got a couple calls about this today. No, we're good. So no other public comment, Mark. So we can close it for this application. Back to you.
Okay, thanks. We'll close public comment. Okay, so this does seem to be in order. Just to review very quickly, each business is entitled to one flat sign and one per business and one additional projecting sign per building. That's not proposed here. So this is and the size and proportions and so forth are it would seem to be appropriate for the building and so forth. The materials we've already gone over. It's going to be wood, which is appropriate. So we've got the paint colors right there. So I think everything is in order. I'm fine with this. Any objections, commissioners?
Nope.
Okay, I will move that the application be approved as submitted with the proviso that the sign be installed, that any fasteners used to install the sign are mounted in the mortar joints and not directly into the brick.
Yes, that is our plan.
Great. Okay, do we hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes, so the application is approved. Thank you both for coming in. You got a letter
Thank you
from
very
Nick,
much.
confirming the determination. Any questions, just follow up with him directly. Thanks a lot. And look
Thank you.
forward to the new place. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, next is 282 Cambridge Street, which I believe is the Blank Street Coffee, which is Raymond Phil, if I'm Boston Sign. I think I saw somebody with Boston Sign log in before. Is that Ray? Yes, Ray Boston Sign, Nick, I think.
Boston Sign.
There we go. Oh, we had you for a second there. There we go. Ray, is that you?
Yes, this is.
Okay, well, you're muted again, but please,
Yes.
why don't you go ahead? Thanks
Yes,
for
this
coming
is.
in.
Yes, this is Ray from Boston Sign.
Okay, thanks for coming in. Do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you're proposing? We've got the application in front of us, but just tell us what you want to do very quickly. Oh, Ray, you're muted again.
We plan to replace the existing sign.
Sure, what's going on here?
All right, so we plan to replace the existing sign with the exact same thing, but just painted in a different color, and using the new logo, which drops the word coffee, and it just says Blank Street. It's the same program for both signs, the blade sign and the wall sign. The light fixtures that are existing will remain, and the sign materials are listed in the drawing, which is aluminum signs with aluminum letters.
Okay, very good. So it's the same size, just changing the colors, same mounting bracket. Everything else is the same. Okay, that seems to be in order. Okay, commissioners, any other clarifying questions as to what's proposed?
No.
Okay. And Ray, just a quick question. The projecting sign, the one that used to say Blank Street Coffee, and we'll just say Blank Street, that projects from the building, it's the same size?
It's the same sign. We're going to take the sign down, reface it, repaint it, and put it
even
back
better.
up.
Great. Okay, perfect.
Same
Thank you.
holes, same hardware, same everything. No new holes, no new nothing.
Okay, great. Thanks. Any other questions, commissioners, before we take public comment?
No.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. We'll take public comment. If you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in your Zoom. Nick will call on you and unmute you.
Okay, first up is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed. The length of the wall sign satisfies guideline I-7 for relationship to the size of the shop front, and the blade sign uses the existing mounting bracket, though the attachment is unusual as it supports the sign from below rather than the traditional method hanging vertically from a bracket above. End of comment.
Okay,
All right.
thanks, Rochelle.
I don't see any other comments, Mark, so we can go ahead and close it for this application.
Okay, public comment is closed. I'm fine with this, commissioners. It's again, it's just changing the colors and everything else stays the same. It's all stuff we approved it before. So just sort of changing the colors and so forth. Any objections?
No.
Okay, I will move that the application be approved as submitted.
Seconded.
Okay, we'll vote Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the application is approved. Thank you very much, Ray, for coming in. You'll get a letter from Nick confirming our determination. Any questions, just follow up with him. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next is 3133 Charles Street, which is, looks like, is it Maria?
Yes, it is me.
Oh, hi, Maria. Welcome. Is it just you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I know we're gonna, let's see. Okay, so again, we've got your application and you were here not long ago, or your company was, but you want to just give us a very brief summary of what you're proposing?
Yes, we're basically doing an interior fit out of this retail space at 31 and 33 Charles Street. This is the existing facade with the temporary vinyl that's been already approved by your commission. And what we are proposing is the exterior signage portion of this, which is replacing the blade sign and replacing the awning fabric with a logo. That's it.
Okay, great. So this is the awning right here. The blade sign it's very thin, so it's a little hard to see, but it's in the upper right of that. There's the other view. So that's looking down Charles Street toward, this is the Chestnut Street side, is that right?
That's correct. And that is the existing bracket.
Yeah.
And we're
Great.
just adding the sign, and we would like it to be aluminum if
Okay.
possible, but we will accept, any changes that you deem fit.
Okay, and Maria, just one last question on the sign. It's the existing bracket. The letters that say Sicily Paris, are those raised in size or just painted on?
No, they're just painted on.
Okay, very good. What else? I think that is about it. And the awning, again, just to be clear, we just saw it a moment ago, but it's on both the Charles Street side and the Chestnut Street side, right?
Yes, there's actually 3 awnings. If we go to that the other sheet, yes, we have that. This is 31 and 33 Charles Street, and we have another awning on the return on Chestnut. So each awning, because this used to be originally 2 separate stores, and
Right.
it was combined on the interior into one larger store. And so we're proposing one small logo on each awning.
Got it. Okay. Very good. So, and just for the commission's benefit, I don't know if they're there now, but there were awnings in this location with lettering on them. There was a sign hanging from that bracket for the prior business.
Yes.
And so forth. Right.
The awning is existing right now. There was a previous awning. I believe the 3rd page shows the 3 different variations.
Okay. And this is going to
That's
be the extent of the signage, right?
Yes, you see the 2 different
Yeah.
rules, flowers, and then the middle one is somewhere in, a couple of decades ago. Then on the right is existing.
Right. Okay. Very good. Let's see. So, and no other signs. Just to be
That's
clear.
it.
Right. Okay. That seems pretty straightforward. Commissioners, any other questions before we take public comment?
No.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. If you want to be heard on the record and make a public comment, please raise your hand using the button on your Zoom, and Nick will unmute you.
Okay, first up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hills Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed, as it satisfies guideline I-9 with regard to signage. The replacement fabric for the awnings is appropriate. The aluminum blade sign is appropriate size and uses an existing bracket, and this double storefront has traditionally had 2 awnings on the Charles Street facade with this store name. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. Not seeing any other comment, Mark, so we can close it for this application and turn it back to you.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you, Rochelle, and thank you for that last point. That's what I had thought I remembered too, but I wasn't entirely sure, but the prior awning indeed was on both. I think, again, because it's double storefront, that's appropriate, something we've likely done before. So it seems to be in order with respect to compliance with the sign guidelines and so forth. So I'm fine with it. Commissioners, any other views?
Fine.
By the way, the one other aspect of the sign guidelines, which is not universally adhered to on Charles Street, but these projecting signs are supposed to be below the 2nd floor sill, which this is. So compliant in that way as well. Okay, hearing no objections, I will move that the application be approved as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we'll vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. The application is approved. You got a letter from Nick confirming our determination. If you have any questions, just follow up with him directly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. So next we're going to talk about this building again. Is it you again, Maria, or is it Steve going to talk on for?
It's Steve, Mark.
Okay, Steve is on here somewhere. I saw him. Steve Young.
Where'd he go? Oh, there he is.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Steve. Let's just get you unmuted. There you go.
Hi, Mark. Good. There. I think I'm unmuted now.
You are. You are indeed.
Well, good evening, everybody. This application is to repaint the building as is from the second floor up, and on the first floor to repaint it black, which is the color of the existing awnings and the ones that are going to be replaced. The black designation in the application was from the color of the front door, which I've understood since then might be more appropriate. The color of that's used on the building might be more appropriately a latex acrylic semi-gloss. But whatever the commission says on color is fine with us.
Okay, so Steve, just to clarify, sorry, we're getting an echo here. Steve, can you just mute yourself for a second? Is that help? Yes, I think that's cured it. We will unmute you again as needed, Steve. Thank you. So just to clarify, the image we're looking at now, the proposed repainting in black is simply the storefront elements, right? The as Nick is kindly pointing out right now, up to this, let's call it a frieze or something, above or at the transition between the first and second floor, all of these vertical elements, and then the horizontal ones that wrap the top above the awnings. Is that correct, Steve? And everything else stays the same color?
No.
Oh, sorry, I got to unmute Steve. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's true in the first floor. The rest of the building will be painted in the same color it is. It exists today.
Right, very good. Thank you.
And Mark, so it's my interpretation of these that if you're painting the exact same color on the upper levels, I would consider that routine maintenance. So we don't have to discuss that this evening.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep, and I'll work with Steve to make sure that we get the right color there.
Right, okay. Okay, that's quite helpful. And any other questions, commissioners, as for what's proposed in well, let's just call it the repainting of the storefront portion of this building?
No.
Okay, let's go ahead and take public comment. If you want to be heard on the record, raise your hand in your Zoom. Nick will unmute you.
Okay, first up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hills Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed, but would posit black may not be the most historically appropriate choice to satisfy guideline G1 for this early 19th century federal style building and early 20th century colonial revival storefront, both of which favored light trim colors. Additionally, if black is considered, a matte or semi-gloss finish would perhaps be more appropriate. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. Mark, I'm not seeing any other public comment for this application.
Okay, thanks. We'll close public comment. So, commissioners, I did a very brief and probably not scientific survey of the prevalence of this condition of the storefront being one color and the building above being another. I counted it easily a dozen such examples on Charles Street, just with a quick survey. So it's more the exception than the rule probably in terms of numbers, but it is not entirely uncommon. Even right across the street, for example, the Butler hardware business has a black storefront, and then interestingly, I suppose, sort of a light red, kind of brick colored treatment of the windows and other trim details in the building. In fact, you see both a dark storefront with a light configuration above, like what's proposed here, as well as the reverse, a light storefront with black window sash above, and multiple examples of both of those configurations. I think in general, I am okay with that because it sets apart. I kind of like the setting apart of these major architectural or changes in the architectural history of the building that are set apart by different paint colors and so forth. It's a different use, but it's also a different period and so forth. And that's in general in architecture, of course, that's not an uncommon treatment. We'll talk about that a little bit later in 155, 159 Charles, where we're proposing a different treatment in terms of coloring and materials and so forth. And so I'm not particularly bothered by the difference in color. We talked earlier in the evening with an example of a different color treatment of shutters and sash and the entrance and so forth. Part of the variation that we see across buildings in Beacon Hill. That's my 2 cents. Does anyone have a different view?
We should all be up on this. The last meeting we saw something like this. The last couple of meetings, so we should all be up on it.
Okay. Anyone else?
No.
The other thing I'll note, it is a gloss finish that's proposed. This is something that's pretty common in European storefronts, at least. You see it in New York, maybe more often than Boston for sure. But there is a real world example of this in case you're a little worried that it might be really jarring or striking. 37 Clarendon, which is one of the more recent South End Buttery locations, which is quite a handsome storefront with a fair amount of architectural detail that has a gloss paint finish. And I think it actually looks quite nice. So I think I'm okay with that aspect of it as well. Might even be a little better maintenance wise.
Fine.
Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections to the application as proposed, so I'll go ahead and move that the application be approved as submitted.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we'll vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the application is approved. Thanks, Steve, for coming in. You got a letter from Nick confirming the determination. Any questions, as always, just follow up with him. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
He's still muted. Okay, moving right along. Next is 14 Beacon, Scott Winkler. I think I just saw Scott. There he is. Hi,
Good
Scott.
evening, everyone. Scott Winkler from Westland Architects. Here to talk about 14 Beacon Street. As you probably noticed, we're planning a full masonry restoration on the building this year, and most of that is under your administrative approvals. But
Susan,
can you hear me?
speak up, please.
Oh, is that better?
That's better.
So 14 Beacon, we're doing a full masonry restoration this year on the building. And the item that we're reviewing at the hearing tonight is specifically the marble panels. And so in case you're not aware, all of the accent pieces on the building that look like they might be limestone are actually marble. And the marble was cleaned inappropriately many years ago with an acidic cleaner, which has resulted in what they call sugaring, which is the surface is very eroded. Unfortunately, we can't do much about that, but we are going to be doing a gentle cleaning of everything using an appropriate cleaner. We did a hands-on assessment about a year ago where we were up on a boom lift, sounding out all the masonry to find the problems. And what we discovered at that time were these 9 marble panels, which you're seeing in these photographs, were not only heavily deteriorated on the surface, but in fact, the face of the stone is delaminating. So it is actually trying to fall off the building. And it's probably a combination of the acidic cleaner absorbing in, because these are areas that would have been cleaned more heavily because they're so ornamental, as well as the amount of water that runs off the windows above and then absorbs into the stone. So unfortunately, they're beyond saving. We normally repair stone by either doing Dutchman, which is partial stone replacement, or possibly repair mortars. But these panels are beyond that. We can't salvage them. There would be nothing left to attach to once we removed all the loose material. If you haven't seen the building lately, the upper left-hand corner shows you that last year we actually had to put netting, safety netting, over those panels to prevent falling debris and protect public safety. And so these panels need to be replaced. And there's really only two choices. We could have real marble carved again, but that's actually fairly difficult to do at this level of ornamentation, and quite lengthy process. And so we really need to get these repaired this year or replaced this year. If you look at some of the detailed photographs, you'll actually see some really nice chisel marks and things, even in the flat sections. It's very ornate, and what we're proposing is a cast stone where they will actually be able to recreate all of that. And they will be doing two things. They're actually going to be 3D scanning these in place before they remove them. And then, because we're worried we're going to lose too much of them in the removal process and not have something to recreate from.
Thank you.
Once they're removed, we're going to hopefully be able to find, there's two sizes. The top floor is a little smaller, shorter, and the other 6 are the same. We're hoping to have one of each size that is intact enough to work from and to cast off of. But we also will have the 3D scan, which is another way to remake these. The scans are accurate enough now that they'll have all of that detail in them, and they actually will, in that case, they actually use a CNC router to recreate this profile in likely wood, and then they cast off of that. But if we're able to save these, they would be repaired enough to cast off of to make the molds for the new ones. And then the new pieces would be put in. Again, they're cast stone. Nick, if you go to the next page, these are some examples from the company that we're working with. These are not the bottom ones. There's you've probably seen brownstone. The bottom left and right corners are brownstone pieces that were remanufactured in cast stone. The center is a limestone replica in cast stone, and then the top is actually the Rosecliff Mansion. The balustrade or parapet wall at the very top is all remade in cast stone. So those are some projects this company has done. If you go back, Nick, to the other page again. Again, the yellow highlights are the 9 panels, so they are 3 stories in the air. And as you probably know, this building is the distance you can view this building from is not great, given its sort of relatively narrow street at this point. So we think this is an appropriate way to restore these and get back all of that detail. And we have to do something this year for safety reasons.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the detailed presentation. Just 2 quick questions to clarify. What we're calling a panel here includes this sort of OG profile molding that goes around the outside. Is that correct?
Yes, that's part of this spandrel panel. That's part of it. So there's there's a large sill at the top and a large lintel at the bottom. Those are remaining. It's the panels between the panel is between that. That's one large piece that includes the OG molding.
Okay, and the other, just quickly, 9 panels. It looks like there is some variation in the design, or are some of them replicated across the facade?
The top 3 are shorter, and then the other 6 are the same.
Oh, they're identical in the design, the other 6?
Correct.
Okay.
The shorter ones are a little different. It spreads the design out a little bit.
I'll explain in a minute why I'm asking, but that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, any other clarifying questions? I have taken a look at this from the street, and yeah, even the lowest of them is pretty high up. Any other clarifying questions before we take public comment? No. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Let's take public comment. If you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand using the button in your Zoom, and Nick will unmute you.
Okay, first up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed, as the restoration technology should allow satisfaction of guideline A2 in composition, design, color, texture, and other visible qualities, even if in-kind in marble is no longer possible. A physical sample should be requested to confirm this in advance of work. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. Mark, I'm not seeing any other public comment. Let me just check the portal here. Let's see. Public comment, Mark, so back to you.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, I mean, of course, we have, or not of course, but we certainly have allowed the use of cast stone products to replace damaged or missing ornamental details and so forth. It's generally been brownstone where we have at least most commonly done that. These are, again, at some distance from the street, particularly the upper ones. I walked by the building yesterday and I'm not even sure I noticed the netting, to be perfectly honest, because it's so high up. But I think my one concern, which would echo, I think, Nick's staff recommendation, would be, and the reason I was asking Scott if they were identical is, normally any kind of masonry work, we would, as a matter of practice or matter of course, we would request a sample in advance, for cleaning or something like that. For something, I think, of this magnitude, I think I would be more comfortable if we literally had a sample of one of the panels, like you show us not a floor sample of the company's products or something like that, which would of course give us a sense of, things like the workmanship and how closely they could match color and so forth. But I think I would be more comfortable, given the importance of this, to actually do one of these and have Nick take a look at it to see if we're convinced that it's going to do the job. Commissioners, any other thoughts?
Oh, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I'd already planned to submit a sample of the actual stone material with the right color selection as well.
And okay, maybe, I mean, and this is something perhaps you could just agree with Nick if he's comfortable doing that, as to the extent of what we want to sample of. But maybe it's even just part of a panel or one of these elements like this. I don't know what would be a good, whatever would satisfy Nick that it's going to do the job, I think.
Yeah.
But Nick, go ahead.
I'll just say that I think it's a good idea to have me inspect them, and I'll also bring my staff architect with me. But it would be good to inspect them on the ground, well, somewhere where we can get up and close to them and review the texture and the appropriateness, and also from a distance, because that's what they'll be seen. So I think that's the best practice. Yeah.
Okay, and Nick, would you want to see them make a whole one of these first?
I feel
and approve that?
the intricacies of the details, I think that would be best. Yeah, I think that would be best, with the ability to kind of return it back to the commission if I'm not satisfied with the quality of the detail.
Sure.
I think that would be a good idea. I have a quick question though, and make it quick. But Scott, do you know approximately, based on, I don't know, science and chemical reactivity, how long ago the cleaning happened?
We did our first review of this building 8 or 9 years ago. We replaced and restored windows on the building at that time. The result of that was a window restoration project. And then the masonry was always something we had planned to do, but the full survey that we did. But at that time, it was like that. You can see it when you're up on the roof. You can see the same problem. It's all damaged. The surfaces are all damaged. It was definitely been a while.
Great, thank you.
And I fear that they didn't neutralize the acid at the time. So along with using an acidic cleaner, which you're not supposed to use on marble, I fear they didn't neutralize it. And so I think it continued to deteriorate the surface beyond the cleaning process.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Feingold, please.
Do I understand from what I've heard of the presentation that in terms of preservation technology, this is a replication of these panels? Is that correct?
Yeah, the intention, as I understand it, would be to replicate exactly what's there. Obviously, it's deteriorated, so to restore them in the process to what they would have been originally. But he's saying, I believe Scott was saying, that even though the material is eroded significantly in places, they believe they have enough to make a faithful replica of how it would have existed originally. Is that right, Scott?
Correct. Yeah, we're going to take the scans, and if we need to use them as the base information, we'll composite them, and then they'll actually electronically, if you will, rebuild the faces where they're eroded, and or take parts and pieces from the different ones. If we use an actual panel to make it, we will build back the face of the panel. Usually they use clay to remodel.
But in what, sir, what material? Wood?
The new one will be cast stone, the replacement
cast
piece.
stone. Oh, okay.
Concrete.
And Mo, I think the idea would be they would make one of them, an entire panel, and they'd bring it to the site and
Yes.
show it to Nick and literally hold it right next to the original and have Nick take a look at it.
Right. Well, that's a heroic effort, I think, to make a replication of that. That'd be good.
Yeah, I think.
I think. Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, Nick, if we can probably talk about this, but obviously one of these panels is well beyond moving around. So perhaps we make a corner of it that can be physically moved and compare it to the existing so that it's, these things probably weigh 500 pounds each. So
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I think with that proviso that they make one panel and have staff inspect it, and that they wouldn't make any further panels or install anything until Nick's approved it. And Nick would reserve the right to send it back to us if he's not satisfied, then I would be okay with it.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Any objections to that approach? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and move that the application be approved as submitted with the following provisos. That a sample of one of the panels be constructed and inspected by staff on site, and that staff also have the opportunity to inspect all of the existing panels as he deems appropriate on site in advance of any of the other panels being manufactured or any panels being installed, and that staff would further reserve the right to return the application to the full commission if he deems that anything about it unsatisfactory. But in any case, the final approval of the sample panel would rest with staff.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the application is approved with that proviso. Scott, you'll get a letter from Nick detailing all that, and obviously you'll be following up with him. If you have any other questions apart from what we talked about, obviously just follow up with Nick again directly as well. Thanks a lot for coming in.
all right, thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good luck with the project. Okay, we are moving along here. 107, and again, just a heads up, we're going to take a 5-minute recess before 155, 159, Charles. So after the following application, we'll take a 5-minute recess. 107, Charles, which is Patrick Mahoney, I think. Patrick? Shannon Rooney, is that you? Okay.
Yep.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for coming in.
This is Shannon Rooney with Monty French Design Studio. We're the architect here on behalf of the ownership team.
Thanks for coming in. Do you want to just give us a very quick summary of what you are proposing?
Yes, so we have a couple things we'd like to discuss with you tonight. Firstly, we are proposing new exterior lighting and new mailbox units at 105, 107, and 109 Charles Street. These are 3 properties right adjacent to each other, identical buildings. So proposing identical solutions here. And the second thing we'd like to discuss with you is we're ownership team would like to upgrade the heating and cooling system. So we will look at towards the end of the presentation the location of the condensers and how we plan to abide by the design guidelines for the HVAC updates. So I'll walk you through a couple slides here. In the center, you see 107 Charles Street, 105 cropped out to the right, 109 cropped out to the left. And if you go to the next slide, Nick, the better image of the building entry. This is a typical entry for all 3 of these properties. Something to note here is that we had a previous violation for a lit intercom system, which we have since ratified based on the design that was approved in October by the commission. So we just installed these brass intercom coverings last week. So these entry updates that we're proposing today, we're hoping to better match this new condition. So if you go to the next slide. just a different view of kind of the mailbox and intercom elevation with this kind of rendering of the new intercom coverings. And if we go to the next slide, we can see our proposed condition. Yes. So if you go one previous, sorry, we can see the lighting and kind of a side view of the mailbox. The idea behind replacing the lighting is to kind of refresh the entry and to replace it with a fixture that just uses a single standard bulb. So it will be easier for our team to keep up with maintenance at the properties. And if you go to the next slide, we'll take a closer look at the mailbox that we're proposing. So the color is a little off here because we're using kind of an internet image for this rendering. But we're proposing a new mailbox unit that would be kind of a gold brass finish with a vertical orientation instead of the existing kind of horizontal orientation. So the idea here is that the finish would better match these new intercom coverings and the door hardware. And then the new unit also gives us a little bit more breathing room in this entry. So things are not as kind of compact and cluttered around the intercom. So if we go to the next slide, I think we'll transition into some product information. This is the product that we're looking at for the lighting in the mailbox. And then we can transition to talking about the HVAC. So this is the current state of the rear yard at 107 Charles Street, as you can see it from the public alley Cedar Lane Way. So basically what we're proposing is that any kind of piping and line sets that would be exposed by the new HVAC system would be covered with this copper downspout covering in any locations that would be visible from the public way. Essentially, we are looking to replace the existing heating and cooling system with a mini split and condenser units for kind of better resident comfort and for better energy efficiency. So if we go to the next slide, we can see kind of in the rear yard where we propose to locate the condensers. You can see the dashed pink line indicates the datum we've established that kind of indicates where things would be visible from the public way. So anything that would be visible would be covered with this copper downspout covering. And if you go to the next slide, we are proposing to locate all of the condensers in a location that would not be visible from the public way. Something to keep in mind here is that there is a limitation on these units. The piping has a maximum length of 65 feet. So we do need to keep things located somewhat closely to the rear elevation of the building just to not exceed that limit. But we feel very confident that we have enough space that we will not be able to see any of these condensers from Cedar Lane Way. And you can see here the kind of lighter hatch indicates the space requirements we would need for each of these 6 units, and the black line indicating the path that any piping would take to get from the units to the exterior and to the condenser. So at this time, if you go to the next slide, we have some product information about the kind of mini splits and condensers we would plan to install, but would be happy to answer any clarifying questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. One question, if we go back one, Nick, 2, sorry, yeah. Am I understanding that this copper panel has already been installed?
No, this is kind of like a photoshopped rendering. We have installed this at a different project. So I used a photo to kind of create this rendering. So this copper material is not currently installed at 107 Charles Street.
Okay, Nick, did you say, forgive me if I've just misunderstood, that you went out and saw this?
Sorry, no, I thought I got a picture from Rochelle. Are they in the Civic Association comments?
Oh, maybe so. Yeah, my memory.
So this material is installed next door at 105 Charles. We had kind of an existing Nick and I had been corresponding at this, so I used a photo from next door. We can't see it in any of these images. But this copper material is installed at 105, which in these images would be off screen to the left of this property.
Okay, it was, you're right, Nick, thank you.
Yeah, we can see it towards the top of the image here.
Yeah, okay, it looks like you can see that because they got a photo of it. We'll come back to that, but
And Mark, we should also talk about the actual public way here, just to be on the record about that, because it's not an actual street, it's a footpath, but it is a public footpath.
right, so this is the end, almost the very end of Cedar Lane Way, which at this point is a footpath, not a street, but it is a public way. And so the visibility of this, there's a small gate at 105, right? That's kind of low. So I suspect the Civic Association, yes, it's even in the picture that the Civic Association took. It looks like it's only about, what, less than 4 feet tall. So you can easily see into the backyard here. And I think that's why they were able to see the copper treatment on 105. Which we're going to need to address as well. But okay, so to clarify, what you are proposing is this copper treatment. Yeah, there's the and if we swing around, it's the building to the left, I guess. Let's see.
Yeah, the gray gate you see, the shorter
Yeah,
gray
there it
gate
is,
is
right.
105 property, and then we have that kind of, yeah, so the gray CMU is where 107 is located. We're looking at 105 right now.
Right, okay, so it's the leftmost building here, the one in the middle, and the one that's just sort of behind the trees there to the right. Okay, so and to be clear, you're proposing just as on the front, where you have 3 buildings and you want to redo the entry with the lighting and the mailboxes in each of the 3 buildings, you are proposing to put this HVAC equipment and the related lines on all 3 of these buildings?
So right now we're only looking at doing this at 107 Charles for the HVAC upgrades, which is kind of the middle building, or in the kind of Google Street View we were looking at. It's to the right.
Okay, thanks. Okay, very good. So you're representing here that the condensers would not be visible from this public way, this footpath, Cedar Lane Way?
That's correct.
And that basically what we're just looking at above that red line right there is what would be visible, which is the proposed copper covering. One final clarifying question before we take public comment on all this. The lines that we see, since this is a photoshopped, now that I understand a photoshopped rendering, those lines that we see to the left and right of the top portion of the copper right there that Nick is now indicating, are those existing, or is that you've drawn those in?
Those are existing. I believe it's electrical conduit. So any lines you see in this image are existing.
Okay, right. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead, unless commissioners have any further clarifying questions. So it's 3 things to recap. It's new pendant lights in the entries, new mailboxes in the entries, and this copper covering to disguise the what would be new HVAC condenser lines on the rear of just this one building at the moment. But the mailboxes and the lights are in all 3.
Yes.
Okay, any further questions to clarify from the commission before we take public comment? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and do that. If you want to be heard on the record and make a public comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom, and Nick will call on you and unmute you.
Okay, first up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Civic Association, we do not oppose the new vestibule light as it is traditional in style to meet guideline E6. We do not oppose the new mailbox as it is of appropriate detail for new work, satisfying guideline A3, and is brass faced and flush mounted in the wood trim to meet guideline E7. We oppose the massive copper covering of the letter lines at the rear facade as it increases rather than reduces visual impact in direct contravention of guideline A9 and as clearly evidenced next door at 105 Charles Street. End of comment.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. I'm not seeing any other public comment, Mark, so we can turn it over back to you.
Okay, why don't, in the interest of expediency here, since I think the mailbox and lights are going to be less controversial, let's take those two first. So it's just a revision, let's say, of the pendant light to that, which is, again, as Rochelle said, thank you, Rochelle, by the way, traditional and I think pretty consistent with a lot of the pendant fixtures we've seen. The mailbox is similar size, just will now better comport with the color of the brass intercom cover. And Shannon, how closely do you think you could match the color with the mailboxes? I know you said the image is just what you got off the internet, but do they have a brass finish that's at least closer to that yellower brass that you see on the intercom panel cover?
So we have not been in touch with the manufacturer of this project. We're a little bit limited with the mail because it needs to be a USPS approved product. But we can certainly reach out and see if we could procure a sample to confirm that it would be in better keeping with the intercom coverings.
Okay, that'd be helpful. And what about those numbers? They're kind of, how do I say this diplomatically? They're not as refined as the numbers on your nice, as your very nice intercom panel cover.
Yeah, so I believe the numbers for this product are a kind of post-applied sticker type of product. So we could certainly workshop that to get something that's a little bit in kind of more aesthetically pleasing solution than what is demonstrated on their website.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. I think, and to the extent that you could, as an inspiration, let's say, I think again, the lettering on the intercom panel is a good place to start. Okay, commissioners, any concerns, questions about the lighting for the moment and the mailboxes?
I think you covered it.
Okay, so we're going to try to get better numbering and get a closer color. I think we'll make those as provisos closer to the mailbox, the intercom cover. Okay, so then as regards to the back, it sounds like we're okay with in principle the lighting and the mailboxes. I tend to agree with the Civic Association's comment that the brass cover, well, we appreciate the intention here, which is to reduce the ugliness of something that is obviously industrial in character and by its nature not very aesthetically pleasing. I think this is a case where the cure may be worse than the disease, as it were. And given particularly that there's a bunch of industrial stuff on there already, these conduits and so forth, I think it's just again, appreciate the intention, but it's drawing attention to something that we kind of want to make it more go away. I think we need to go back to the drawing board for this, which might even mean, as one example to give you some more guidance, Shannon, maybe you come back with some alternatives, one of which is just show us what it would look like if you didn't try to disguise it at all. Because there's already a bit of a, hodgepodge of lines and conduits and junk there. And, that might be one direction. What would it look like if you just put the lines there, as it were? How close can you get them to those electrical conduits, for example? And then maybe is there a solution that would incorporate all of them? Right? If you could do something, again, I think the brightness of the brass is problematic in general. We have approved in the past, enclosures for conduits and stuff that are just either, dark brown or something approaching the color of the brick, to sort of make it go away on the facade, understanding that you're never going to make it invisible. But maybe is there a way to bundle them all together so that you have one brown colored enclosure that just incorporates all the electric conduits and the service lines for the HVAC. Maybe there's technical issues that prevent that. We don't know. So that's what we'd want to explore. But I think, at least to my eye, we need an alternative, something else for this, these HVAC lines on the back.
Yeah, I think so. Bundling kind of all of the utility things that are currently present. We would probably not want to move the existing electrical conduit, but bundling the new HVAC related kind of piping and line sets is certainly doable. And I think our team is certainly open to other finishes. A dark brown would probably be a little bit more better camouflage alternative, maybe a better aesthetically pleasing alternative. So we're open to other solutions for this.
Okay, and there was one, Nick, I'll try to figure it out later, but we just approved something to cover up a bunch of ugly conduits a few months ago. It was similar to this. It was kind of in a side alley that you could see from
Revere
the
Street.
street. Revere, yeah, exactly. So maybe Nick could point you to that example.
Great.
As again, not saying that we would necessarily approve what we approved there, but just as an example of how to treat this problem. Okay. So any other thoughts about that? It sounds like Ari and you agree that we need to go back to the drawing board on this copper thing. Any other thoughts on that?
I think that your idea of let us just see what it looks like as it is. Less is more.
Yeah, I mean,
Less is just more.
Yeah, so maybe it's just ask them to sort of render a couple variants, one of which is just literally uncovered, and put them as close together as possible. Okay, any other thoughts on the conduit challenge back here? Or the line? Okay, so let's see. In that case, I will move that the application be approved with respect to the pendant lighting and the mailboxes for the front entrances, with the proviso that number one, the final brass color of the brass of the mailboxes be made to match as closely as possible, if not exactly, the brass color of the existing intercom panel covers, and that the numbers on the mailboxes be made to match as much as feasible the lettering on the existing intercom cover panels, and then denied without prejudice with respect to the proposed copper cover for the HVAC lines on the rear facade, with the applicant asked to return with alternatives to the current proposal that show in the first instance the lines simply grouped together and uncovered, and then secondly with an alternative cover that would be darker in color, attempting to match the brick or otherwise draw less attention to itself.
I second it.
Okay, we will vote on the motion. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. So at least you got 2 of the 3. And if you just come back to us, you'll get a letter from Nick detailing all of our determination, and then we'll just want to see you back to finalize the design for the rear here as well. You're probably going to hear from Nick about 105 as well, by the way, because that was installed, I think, without permission, and we can see it.
I'll touch base with you tomorrow, Shannon. I'll give you a buzz.
Great, thanks all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us finally to 155, 159. As advertised, I'd like to take a 5-minute recess, no more than 5-minute recess right now, and then we'll get right into it, since I know this one is probably going to take a while. So we will be with you, be back with you in 5 minutes. Thanks.
6:45, everybody. So just put your calendars down there. I'm going to make you the co-host, and let's just keep this up for now, Eric, and then we'll have you display it, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Nick, is everyone back?
All right, I see Sandy. I see you. I don't see Mo. Is that Mo? There's Mo. Um, let's see. Just waiting for Aaron.
I
you
never
back?
left.
You never left. Okay. All right. Sure, there's a song there somewhere. Great. So, all right. So I can. Let's see. Eric, you have the ability to unmute yourself, and I do believe William wants to speak first.
Yep.
All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, where's William? Hi, William.
Hello.
All right. So if you want to go ahead, okay, perfect. Mark, you ready for it?
Yeah, before you begin, just very quickly, thank you for coming in. I know this is a big project that's been a long time in the making, and I look forward to our conversation this evening. We did see this project as an advisory review a few months back. I can tell already, having reviewed the revised application carefully, that you've made pretty significant changes to the proposal. So we thank you in advance for your thoughtful consideration of our comments at that time, and look forward to talking with you further this evening. As you know, or just in case you don't know, and for the public's benefit, our process, this is a big, complicated project. We'll probably have lots of questions, and I don't know what the likelihood is, maybe not very high, that we'll actually resolve everything tonight and come away with approval, but we certainly have the ability within our process to defer a final determination on this to a later hearing, or if we so choose, to defer even just a portion of the proposal to a later hearing. Anyway, with that minor preamble, please, gentlemen, thank you for coming in, and please go ahead and with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairman Kiefer. My name is William Young. I'm the historic consultant on this exciting project, which aims to heal the violence that was done to this end of Charles Street in the 20th century. We're representing Egeria, whom you already know as the owners of the Elliott Hotel on the opposite corner. The project, I'm sorry, corrected. And I'm happy to introduce Eric Robinson of Brody Architects, who will further acquaint you with the project design. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Nick. Good evening, commissioners, and as well to the public. We are excited to be here. It's been not quite a year since we showed you where we were back in March of last year. Well, I'm trying to get my screen to fit. There we go. And, through that process has been a great deal of discussions, community meetings, insight, ideas, thoughts. It's been very exciting to be working on this project. It's clearly very important to the community and to the city at large. That is not lost on us as designers. And we think where the proposal is landed tonight is really both a reflection of that process, but also a step for us as the designers leading this in a way that we think is really a cohesive concept that's being driven through the design. It's very reflective and responsive to the community and to the neighborhood and the historic district that we're working in. And then, you know, I think it has a lot of work to do as a moment that does reflect a corner condition or an elbow condition of two very dynamic moments on Cambridge Street and Charles Street. And we believe we found a design that does embrace that condition. So as William started the conversation, we do always want to make sure we are reflecting on why we are gifted this amazing shape of the site, which is has occurred, as we all know, through time. And the essence of it is really moving from a mid-block condition to actually a very prominent edge condition, and the geometry seems to have followed that along. And I think that has been one of the challenges, I'll say, and also interesting aspects of how do we take this piano curved shape that everybody is familiar with and think about that as it moves forward into its next life. We recognize this moment is important to the front door of Beacon Hill as it relates to coming through Cambridge Circle or the bridge from Cambridge. And Charles Street has really 2 points or 2 ends of it that are quite different in a lot of ways in terms of the context that they're in. Obviously, the park side is anchored by these 2 larger buildings shown in the middle slide on the left. And then, you know, our site is really looking at the Whitney Hotel, which was a great recent project, as well as, you know, our adjacent abutting neighbor, the Top Shelf building, not so old. And just thinking about, you know, what is going to make this particular site be as important and special with a new building of today. Just some existing conditions, photos, just to remind us of this site and how it sits today, with a bit of an eclectic mix of things happening. But what we're really hoping to do is really, as William said, you know, mend this corner and create a building that's befitting of that site. So I'll just take you through a series of diagrams, and then my colleague Ruthie Kuhlman is actually going to take us through some of the more specific architectural responses, and so I'll hand it over to her after I'm through with these first couple slides. So just a quick axonometric diagram of our build-up process, as we call it. Here, sort of looking down the Whitney on our right-hand side, kind of partially cut off, and then the Top Shelf building, and obviously our current site in the middle of the diagram. When we visited with you last March, this was sort of the basic massing diagram that we were presenting, a 6-story building with a very long cantilever on 5 of the floors, with the 6th floor being stepped back, mainly to house the mechanicals, and it had a small footprint up there with some FAR. But generally, the design was this sort of large moment that was really intended to anchor that corner in the transitional moment between Cambridge and Charles Street. Through the process, I'll say with the community, we took a step back, and that kind of large cantilevered moment was broken down into a series of steps, reducing the amount of actual cantilever space as the extension as part of it, and sort of redistributing it along really the Charles Street side. The 6th floor was also removed from the standpoint of occupiable space, it's still a mechanical penthouse, but generally there's no FAR up there anymore. And so this was also basically the design that was taken through zoning. So this was the approved zoning diagram in terms of the amount of extension in terms of over our property line and the area above in terms of the air rights. The project that we're proposing tonight adheres to all those zoning. So there will be no, we don't need to go back to zoning, or we don't need to sort of do any of the regulatory review done previously in terms of the current proposal. So between the time after zoning and then really until the last couple months, you know, we really went back and thought a lot about the proposal and the design and you know, really understanding kind of this notion of the kind of dynamic ground plane of the piano or the CBS building, and then also starting to recognize some of the adjacent curves and what those bring in terms of a dynamic approach to both the Top Shelf and the Whitney. And then we also spent some time walking the neighborhood and thinking about maybe some other sort of aspects of a sort of bay window or kind of move that would be in relationship to the steps, but think about it a little bit differently. And so we really kind of landed on this more of a bow front or curved front aesthetic that we actually thought was a little bit of a better transition from the ground floor of the building and the curve of the existing footprint to the upper level, really thinking about them as more of a curved bay aspect and aesthetic. And then with that, wanting to take the building into its current state and a building today, thought about those bay fronts and curved fronts, and really in response to kind of the dynamic aspect that's happening in Charles Circle with the movement of pedestrian, the movements actually of the urban edge, we inverted those curves and then actually slid them to create a little bit more of a dynamic response on the Charles Street side of the building. Juxtaposed to that, we took many of the cues from the sort of Charles Street aesthetic, which is obviously very regularized and stacked, and sort of then applied that to the Charles Street elevation that will anchor the building on that edge. So really the building's doing sort of double duty as it relates to that corner. There's a relationship to the architecture, which you'll see when Ruthie talks through it, but we felt they needed to have a bit of their own identity as they respond to their urban condition. Here's just turning the diagram a little bit to the other side, where you start to see how we introduced a little bit of a larger window complex or assembly to the Cambridge Street side, and then started to pick up on some of the rhythms of the adjacent buildings. And then again, reinforcing that connection to the ground floor of the commercial spaces along Charles, along Cambridge Street, as well as our building with the new architecture above. With that, I'll turn over to Ruthie, and she's going to take us through the details. Thanks, Ruthie.
Ruthie, I'm coming. Hang on. Let's see. Where is she? Where'd she go? Is she Rhodey Architects?
Yeah, I might say only Rhodey Architects.
Okay,
Yeah, that might be her. Yep.
Sorry, Ruthie.
Thank you. No problem. Everyone got a nice little pause to admire this diagram. Thanks, Eric, for the intro. I'm going to walk through some of the more specific elements and some of the renderings that we've put together. So you can see this is a diagram of Charles Street. You can see our proposed project on the left-hand side and the Charles Street elevation continuing to the right. And all of the elements that we started pulling into this design are responsive to the proportion and elements that occur on Charles Street and throughout the district. So we're really trying to build this project design as a cohesive contemporary design that's built on components that follow the underlying architecture of the district. If you go to the next slide, Eric. So this one, we'll be looking at the Cambridge Street side.
I'm working on it, I promise. There we go, sorry.
So the Cambridge Street side is on the left, and then you can see some of the modules that we were referencing in our axon, so the Charles Street parking garage and the Whitney. And again, carrying that same idea of the elements and proportions, this time at the larger, more contemporary scale on Cambridge Street. Next slide. All right, so this is where we start to walk through some of the rendering. So this rendering is set from the pedestrian bridge coming over the Longfellow Bridge, and you can see how the proposed project from afar starts to set into the context of Charles Circle. If you go to the next slide, we'll zoom in a little bit closer. You can start to see how some of the architectural elements are coming together. You can see the narrow windows that are along Charles Street, and the larger window bays, and the brick framing that starts to come around Cambridge Street. And Eric, if you go to the next slide, we have a couple details that will pop up. But we are envisioning this building as a fully brick sculptural building, and we're looking to achieve the references to the proportions and elements through a change in brick patterning and a change in brick plane. And so what you'll see here is what we're proposing for the cornice, both at the roof and at the level 2 overhang, as a double soldier course with a recessed brick. And then all the window elements, we're proposing a setback brick frame with a change in the brick patterning. We're showing a soldier course here that really starts to hint at the elements and historic framing up and down the street, but in a very contemporary way that matches the sculptural object of the building. And so that's happening both on Charles Street, and the same detail applied differently is happening on Cambridge Street so that it feels cohesive between those two edges. Next slide. So this is a view from further up Cambridge Street. Looking back, you can see the Whitney, and you can start to see how some of the shifting and patterning of the building starts to respond to both the curve of Charles Circle, that piano curve at the ground floor, both having something that relates to the ground floor, but also reaches out and connects towards the Whitney as part of this gateway moment that we're trying to create. Next slide. And so now we're back on Charles Street, and you can see this is just the Charles Street face and how it responds to the language of the windows that march along the bays, changing in elevation, but similar in their proportions and amount of solid wall in between windows. And then as we move to the next slide, moving closer to the project, you can see a little bit down Silver Place, and also see here where the retail starts to show. You can see the reduction of the overhang from what we had back in March fairly clearly on this view. And then the next slide is an elevation view, because it's hard to have a perspective of what we're thinking for Silver Place, which is going to have the main residential entry for the project, which is where Eric is showing it there, as well as the residential entries for 151 to 153 Charles Street, which is right on the other side. So we are looking to incorporate some glazing in there. We're proposing a bay window on this edge with a copper panel across it that would work with the bay windows that are already on 151 Charles Street. And then also looking.
Excuse me, what elevation are we looking at?
This is the Silver Place elevation.
What?
So it's
Mo, it's the little alleyway between the two buildings. So this doesn't exist in reality, right? It's just
you'll never,
you can't actually see this whole view, right?
Thank you, thank you. Okay.
This is a constructed view. You'll see it, Eric. If you can just jump to the slide before, you can see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can see that's it presenting there. So the edge of it will be more visible, but you won't be able to perceive the full elevation. We're just showing it for clarity.
Fine.
And so we're looking to do something similar to what is done across the street at the Charles Street parking garage and the Whitney, using some windows and some change in brick patterning to get a little bit of texture and scale across this facade, also proposing in brick. Next slide. And then as we zoom in, you'll start to see what we're thinking for the retail, which is mostly on Cambridge Street. And we're looking at creating a soffit condition that really starts to connect the elements between the geometry that's above and the geometry that we have on the first floor level. For this, we're envisioning a complementary natural color to the brick, something that does occur in the district in the form of a patina copper or a slate tone. What we're looking at here proposing is a terracotta panel system that would create this at the underside and the vertical edges. We're also showing our preliminary thoughts on a signage plan here, which would be proposing, this will either be 1 or 2 retail spaces, but we propose 2 signs per retail, 1 blade sign, you can see the one on Charles Street there, and then 1 signage band, which we would plan to integrate into the architecture of that soffit above the entry door. And if you go to the next slide, you will see the same zoomed in view of the retail from Cambridge Street, just showcasing that we really are trying to put a lot of open glazing here and really have this connect to the public realm. And you can see the geometry of the soffit above. Next slide. So we are working with Michael D'Angelo, landscape architect, on this, and they've been working on the proposed site plan. So this is just some analysis showing, of course, the extremely oversized sidewalk condition, but all of the desire lines and connection lines across it. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the rendered site plan, which is really proposing to clean up but keep the overall brick elements across the public realm sidewalk, similar to what they are today. And then looking at silver plates to really enhance that, as make it feel like a special residential entry, pulling in some granite paving as well as brick paving in a pattern that accentuates the connection through to the building entry. Next slide. All right, these are a few landscape precedents for those materials. And then our last slide in the presentation here today just takes us back out front a little bit closer to the building so you can see both the first floor and the project above. But this is what we had brought for today, and we are very excited to hear your comments and engage in a discussion.
Great. Thank you very much to all of you again for your thoughtful consideration of all the comments that have come before, and obviously you've worked quite hard to try to incorporate them, and we appreciate the work you put into the revised design. I think in the interest of just moving us forward, the quick usual question for the commission at the moment, the presentation, hopefully you've seen in advance anyway, but it's pretty thorough. But any other questions, just for clarifying sake, in clarity's sake, about what's proposed in the design? Obviously, we will get into the details, but is anything unclear in the presentation at the moment?
For me.
Commissioner Feingold, please.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's see. So we are going to take public comment. I want to try to get a sense of how many people we have who might want to be heard on this. We are at the end of the evening, so I suspect it's probably most of the folks who are on the call, but I'm going to try to, let's put it this way. I would like to try to limit comments to 3 minutes, so we're not here all night. So please try to be succinct, but why don't we go ahead and take public comment so we can take the full benefit of the public comment in the discussion, which we'll get into in more detail, of course, immediately thereafter. So again, if you want to be heard on the record on this, and please, again, if you're new to this, please keep your comments germane to our limited jurisdiction and narrow purview. So it's stuff that you can see from the public way only, which is any public way, street or sidewalk and so forth. The T station, whatever it may be. It's just stuff that can be seen from a public way. And this is new construction, so we've got a bit of a broader perspective here, but our mandate is about architectural and historical appropriateness. And let me actually, I want to take this opportunity right now because it might be helpful for public comment. We do have one introductory guideline about that's directly germane to this, which is guideline A5. You'll probably hear more about that. I'll just read it quickly. Contemporary design for new buildings may be considered if such design is of excellent quality and is compatible with the size, scale, color, materials, and character of neighboring buildings and environment. Now, these are guidelines, not law, and they're not rules even, but they're very helpful in guiding our discussion. So we would just ask that you keep your comments germane to those kinds of issues: architectural and historical appropriateness, size, scale, colors, materials, character, how it relates to neighboring buildings, and so forth. If you've got other stuff that relates to zoning issues like noise or traffic or things like that, that's not in our purview, so we don't want to get into that, and I'll have to redirect the conversation if you do. So with that in mind, 3 minutes each, raise your hand in the Zoom and Nick will call on you and unmute you. Thanks.
Okay. First up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, just to reiterate, guideline A5 states contemporary design for new buildings may be considered if such design is of excellent quality and is compatible with the size, scale, color, materials, and character of neighboring buildings and environment. We constructively offer further ideas and provided pictures related to this goal. The floor-to-floor height and window dimensions could be more closely aligned and proportioned to 151 Charles Street. As secondary facades, the east and south alley facing sides could differ in brick variation as a lighter and rustic common brick with irregularities to stress the traditional hierarchy of the primary facades. The undulating facade along the circle and the bay window on Silver Place could be reconsidered as projections of bay windows horizontally clad in metal panel in appropriately painted or exposed tin colors. The ground level storefronts could become more evocative of North Slope corner stores with wooden paneling and the overhang supported by a column. Silver Place, the pathway, would be appropriate in either all granite pavers or all brick. Again, Silver Place, the proposed string lighting should be replaced with more appropriate traditional fixtures. End of comment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rochelle. Mark, shockingly, I have no other public comment.
I'm a bit
I think
surprised.
so good outreach. They don't need any additional public comments. So.
Okay, so just going with just to make sure, again, if you're new to this and you want to be heard on the record, you will need to raise your hand in the Zoom using that button that hopefully says raise hand and has a little hand at the bottom of your Zoom. I see one. Please let us know now, because we're gonna, when we don't have anyone else waiting, we're gonna close public comment, and that'll be it, at least for this hearing. So I see Reed Dawson. You see that one, Nick?
Yes.
And again, try to keep your comments germane and limit to 3 minutes. Thanks.
Okay, Reed, go ahead.
Just waiting for all the experts to talk first, and I understand we have limited time. I wasn't clear on the brick, but I remember from, maybe it was either at the Beacon Hill Society or at your last meeting that I attended, that the choice of mortar is very important. The choice of brick is very important. And I didn't follow that part of the presentation, because I think having brick is great and replacing the big pavers is great, but I think more detail, at least for me and my understanding. And finally, I just don't understand what's going on with that top floor. And maybe you can explain it better to me, and how it relates to, how it was chosen to relate and be its own building at the same time.
Thank you, Ree. Just while we have you, while we've got the floor, on that latter point, it's not shown, it's peeking out just a tiny bit, I think. But when you say the top floor, just so we understand, there is a head house, a windowless head house that is, we can see in some of the other views. At this low angle, it's not visible, but.
Oh, no, I did mean the top floor with windows along the Cambridge Street side.
Okay, not the sort of a gold colored head house there. Okay,
not the mechanical hidden mechanical piece of the building.
Right.
And I concur, by the way, that the size of the windows just seem, despite the, facing a very glassed subway building, I feel like the size of the windows just feels overly large to me too.
Okay, thank you very much, Ree. Anyone else before we close public comment? Again, once we close public comment, we will not be taking further public comment, at least not in this hearing. So now is your chance. Going once, going twice. Okay, I don't see any more, Nick.
I don't see any other. So, and I'll just double check. Let's see. I have not seen any of the public comment that was submitted via email either. So I think.
Okay, so just for the record, no emails or letters.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Well, in that case, we will close public comment. Thank you, Ree and Rochelle, for your thoughtful comments. I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't have more attention to this, but that'll at least make the hearing shorter, I think. I hope.
There you go.
Let
I would
me-
definitely say that
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
in
Commissioner Allen.
agreement about. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm in agreement about those windows. We definitely want to try to keep this Beacon Hill, and I'm getting a strong sense of South End suddenly plunked down in the middle of Beacon Hill. That's what that kind of reminds me of. And it is a situation where it definitely has to be taller than the other buildings. We can't make it a little more consistent.
Hello?
Commissioner Feingold, go ahead, please.
Well, first I want to compliment the architects and those involved for making a leap forward from the previous presentation last March. I've been looking forward to seeing the next iteration. And I would say the following about it. I think the Charles Street elevation is essentially perfect. The proportion is tall windows. I don't personally like the extra brick detail around it. I know you did something like that, or that was done at the Whitney. I didn't like it there either. It's just sort of a decorative feature. And I'm a pure modernist when it comes to this kind of new detail. And I think it would be clearer to have just an opening, a brick opening with a window. But I would agree, I understand why you might want to do that as a step shadow line. But I just think that you've got Charles Street correct. I like the transparency of the Cambridge Street facade. I have great trouble with this curving, this undulating sort of inward curve in three bays, and I feel that's not going to be a very comfortable resolution, and would prefer you study that further. I'm not going to say don't eliminate them or have them both the other way or something. That's up to you. I just think it needs further study, but I like the idea that it's a great deal of transparency towards Cambridge Street, because Cambridge Street does have many commercial blocks, buildings. It has the new hospital buildings. It has the subway station, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that I'd love to live in one of those apartments and stare at the subway station, but that's a given. I have a question, which is there seems to be a recess on some of these floors, as if there was an outlet to a balcony, and if so, there's no balcony rails shown, and I assume that could be glass or just a simple steel rail, something, but you could explain that further. And so I just think some more study on this facade would be better and appropriate in this sort of waving waving wall needs to be, looks, I think technically it would prove to be difficult over time. And then the last thing is the commercial, the retail at the base. I think the detail you showed seems excessive and just needs further clarification and development. But the transparency of the retail is great. And so I think this is a very good improvement. I love it all in brick, you know, it's showing a darker brick perhaps than, you know, perhaps like the Whitney. Or some other examples around Boston using a darker fired brick, very handsome. And so I think you've listened, and that to me, and I think it's a vast improvement, but it does need further study, like any project does. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Feingold. Let's see, could we just get a clarification, since Commissioner Feingold raised a question, and it sounds like it's simple enough to answer without interrupting the flow here. There are no balconies proposed, right? Because I see there's no doors or openings. Is that
That's correct.
Right.
Those
okay.
are there's no balconies on the Cambridge side. Yeah, there is a small roof deck on the top, but it's set back. You can't. So that's just a small for residents, but not on these bays. No.
But it does show the fenestration, the wall undulating sort of at angles, as if they were creating outdoor spaces.
Yes, they're just not that large, actually. I think they're at the deepest. Ruthie might be able to remind me, but they're only 2 feet at the deepest. So the undulation is actually quite subtle. But so no, those aren't intended to be occupiable.
Okay. Well, it reads a little differently than that, but
it does look a little deeper than 2 feet, but yeah, that's.
Well, I think it's yeah, because it does fold in and fold out a little bit, so it's probably a little bit more than that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 2 feet on the in and 2 feet on the out.
That's what yes.
Right,
Sorry,
right.
that's what I was.
Sure.
And I do, by the way, I do like the undulating bay, the alternating bay system, a vertical system identifying units, so that it's like staggered. It's hollow bricks staggered.
Yeah.
I like to break up the sort of ordinary straight verticality that you might. I like that. So I just am bothered by the undulating, you know, especially at the top floor. That's really
the curve. I just want to make sure I understand. You're referencing the curve of the top. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
And Mo, just on that point, just to further clarify, is it the inside, the outside, or the both that troubles you? In other words, there's looking at the cornice for a second to keep it simplest. It curves one way, then it curves again, and then beneath the cornice you've got the window faces one way, then it faces the other, then it faces one way, then it's flat. So there's 2 aspects that are undulating. Is it both of those aspects or just one?
No, it's the brick undulation. Though the
outside
undulated glass, I like that. It gives a good, nice play of light and shadow and so forth, and could be pleasant to live in. To have different aspects. No, it's not that. I like that. I find that pleasant. I find the curving, the top part of the curving of the floor. I just think that's an item that I find troublesome.
Okay.
That's my view. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Steele, do you want to weigh in before I do?
No, I'm just trying to, so the top one that we skipped over, but the top that you see when you look down at the building, that's just for utilities on the very top?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it has, it's utilities. The elevator does go to the roof for the roof deck, because we need accessibility, and there's the stairs. So, but but they're all pushed quite way back. And then all the mechanicals will be contained within that. So you don't see any of the mechanicals.
So when you said roof deck, did you mean a deck just to do repairs, or did you mean an actual roof deck?
No, we're showing a small outdoor space. Actually, it's kind of on. It's a little hard to see in this view, but and we can certainly bring that to bring a layout of that. I was just thinking we didn't bring any plans, but there's a you sort of come up in the middle of this volume, I'll say, with the elevator and the stairs, and just over on this edge, there's a small outdoor area that is kind of
by
tucked.
Cambridge Street.
Yes, tucked behind the parapet. So we have an elevated parapet, so you don't see the railings or any of that. We didn't want it to interrupt the sculptural sort of nature of the building. But it's sort of set behind there.
And would you say that's for everyone or just the upper unit?
Oh no, that's for the residents of the build, the whole residence. Yeah. No, that's accessible. There's no club room or amenity. There's no room up there. It's really just a place to come out and
open space.
see the sunset.
So you can watch the fireworks.
And see the fireworks. Yeah.
We should see that eventually to make sure that it's. I mean, if people want to go up there on July 4, and
yes,
you've got a big crowd and maybe you can't handle it. So
yep.
Yeah.
You should show some definition of it so that we don't deal with sight lines to railings later.
Yes. Yeah, we actually have the railings shown in this view. They're just we elevated the parapet so it's actually tucked and just from a perspective. But we can bring that to
okay.
the next discussion.
So they're inside the parapet, you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, and they're set back from the parapet too. We're not allowing everybody to come right to the edge. So it's all
right.
Yeah.
It's not a big
It's
deal.
a very small roof deck. I mean, it's a very small building actually, ultimately. But
that's not a big deal right now. What's a big deal is the volume. I think is right. Well, anyway, I think I've finished my comments for now.
Commissioner Steele, anything else?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll go now then. So again, thank you again for obviously the very thoughtful revision. I agree with Commissioner Feingold. I would characterize it as a big improvement. Obviously, you've taken up the comments very thoughtfully. Let's see. I also really quite like the Charles Street facade. I will offer respectfully a slightly different view than my distinguished colleague with respect to the window openings. I actually quite like the further recess because it is otherwise such a simple, quite refined, but simple facade that gives you a little extra texture. I quite like that. But what I really like about it is the sort of fractal nature where the window openings individually are the same proportions as the whole facade. And I think there's it's a very elegant look to it. It also is a kind of a really nice, unmistakably contemporary, but unmistakably referencing the classical vocabulary that's so predominant in Beacon Hill in its proportions. So I think it's quite elegant in that regard, and I quite like it. I think I'm not entirely convinced about, speaking of the windows, just the simple one pane of glass for each window. I like the simplicity of it. I think I probably want to worry about that a little bit more, but I like the whole approach to Charles Street in general, and I agree with Commissioner Feingold. I think it's quite well done. Now, with respect to the Cambridge Street facade, I guess I wouldn't say so much that I'm troubled with the undulation. I applaud the boldness, number one. Let me just say that. I should have said that from the outset. One of the things I was most concerned about in this project in general is that it would be this sort of a classic kind of retreat to safety, and just build the thing that would be easy enough to convince commercial tenants to want to rent there, or folks who want to live there and so forth, and lack any real boldness. It's such a hugely important site, an anchor of Charles Street specifically, the neighborhood more generally, and frankly the whole city, because you see this coming over the Longfellow Bridge from Cambridge. So hugely important to get this right. And I think boldness is appropriate here. for all those reasons, because it's so prominent. It's a huge challenge, and so I don't envy you the task to try to address, all of these disparate influences on the one hand and sort of needs on the other. I think it works better as a shorter building for sure. I think I would echo Commissioner Feingold's concern about the Cambridge Street facade, not so much the undulation. I like the, the sort of, you try to think a little bit out of the box and how can we can, kind of pay homage to the, at least at a high level, the architectural influences we see on the hill, at the same time as kind of honor the existing shape and the sort of curvilinear nature of this, what's now a traffic circle and was never, originally. And so I like it for that. But I think it feels to me the proportions of the Cambridge Street facade, understanding, of course, that part of this is necessitated by the lot lines on the one hand and, the emphatic desire of the community to make it shorter on the other. So you're kind of hemmed in with respect to the proportions. But I just wonder if we could make it even more elegant in its proportions, given the constraints that you've got to work with here. And let's see, a couple of other things that I do like. I like setting off the ground floor retail space with a different treatment with the materials and the color. I think that's a nice sort of subtle reference to that treatment that's ubiquitous on the commercial streets in Beacon Hill and throughout Boston. It's something you see in the architecture generally. I like the boldness of the color choice. Again, we can maybe worry that a little bit more, and so forth. And again, I notwithstanding my prior comments about maybe worrying the proportions a bit more, so we can try to aspire to as much elegance on the Cambridge Street side as we have on the Charles Street Charles Street side. I do like, the introduction of the curvature again, as a sort of high level sculptural element, and just being responsive to all the stuff around there that's not just sort of slavishly, trying to follow the lines of the street or something like that, something less imaginative. So I do like it for that. In terms of other things that I'd like to see perhaps more attention, notwithstanding, I think the intention, which I like, the sort of a simple elegance to the thing, the cornice and this transition from the ground floor to the upper floors, I think maybe could be stronger, in the sense that these again are kind of quintessential archetypal elements of architecture of the earlier eras that are obviously in part inspiring this building. But typically that cornice or frieze, let's say the frieze above the first floor where you have a retail space, particularly where you have a retail space that's in an originally residential building, that tends to be a pretty defining statement of the transition. And again, I like the elegance of the very simple recess of the brick, but I wonder if that could be stronger. Even just looking across the street at the Whitney, for example, it's done simply, but you can see they've set out the those two transitions with the light colored stone instead of the brick, and it projects a bit more from the building to make it a little more prominent. At least evoking what you've got like on the Jeffries house next door, and of course the many cornices you see throughout Beacon. These are often the most the strongest and most ornamental fixtures in the architecture. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that it has to be particularly or emphatically ornamental in its character, but I wonder if it could be stronger to give a stronger reference to those two kind of classic elements. And then finally, just with respect to the windows on the Cambridge Street facade, again, I think I understand what you're going for, but I think there could be more richness in the buildings on the fenestration in the residential floors, something maybe that evokes at least the same impression. I realize it's a similar treatment to the Charles Street facade, but the impression you get from that recess on the Charles Street side, it just to my eye is a lot stronger. And so just something that gives us some more texture. And the fenestration itself is quite simple. That, of course, historically has been the source on these otherwise very austere facades of a contrasting dose of delicacy and lightness, which I like the transparency, but I'm not quite getting that contrasting delicacy and lightness because there's so little in terms of mutton bars and things like that, which normally would serve that purpose.
Yep.
And then finally, just with respect to the ground floor, again, like the transparency, because I think what the community really wants, and I think we'd want to see, is a space that's active and activated and activates the space around it. And so more transparency is better in that regard. But my gut reaction to the ground floor fenestration is it's just kind of more of the same of these kind of more modern or even contemporary commercial buildings that you see on Cambridge Street, which I find, with all due respect to their designers, kind of underwhelming. And I would just offer finally, and I'm sorry I'm going on so long here, but as a reference, I'm not suggesting you should do it like this, because this is a contemporary design, but think of buildings like the Omni Parker House, or a building that I'm guessing is the same architect, which is 124, 126 Newbury Street, where you have, just as you've done here, the ground floor is sort of set off with different materials. It's a dark marble rather than the simple granite or concrete above. But the level of detail, the closer you get to where people are actually going to interact with the building, the more detail you have. And those two buildings have these just really exquisite polished brass or brushed brass ornamental details around the windows. They're subtle, they're classical in motivation and style, but they really make for really a very high quality experience at the ground level. So I would like to see something like that, again, similar in motivation, trying to reserve the highest quality and the most detail, however minor, for that space where we interact directly with the building on the ground floor. So that's a lot. I apologize for going on so long, but thanks again for
a rebuttal.
Yeah.
Rebuttal, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Feingold.
I wrote as many. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Rebuttal. With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, this is a really interesting statement. I would not decorate it like it's a birthday cake.
I'm not proposing that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
You've got lines you want, this and that line. I just wouldn't do that. I think it diminishes the strength of the idea they have here. And I think one of the things I wanted to pick up on was you show in the sketch sort of the verticality at the storefront, like it's not a glass wall.
Yep.
It's broken up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can go back to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you come around the corner, okay. I think when you come around the corner from Cambridge Street and you engage with this commercial strip here, you should feel like you're part of Charles Street here. The scale and detail of the storefronts could be done in a way, maybe not with this stepping ceiling or something, but with the posts and the doors which enter the, I just think that some scale which says, hey, so when I'm walking around the sidewalk, I feel like I'm in a continuous environment. Not to repeat them, but to get the scale or maybe the materials a little bit more consistent with the historic street, as you've done with the Charles Street facade. I think eventually you have to have some opening sections in these doors or these windows and so forth, and eventually some 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 caricature, some character of scale will probably appear in the fenestration without it being a mimic of anything nearby. Is that correct? Architect?
Are you asking me?
Yes. Yes, I'm asking you, the architect.
Yeah. So we actually have looked at introduction of some mullions or muttons and to sort of add, I think, what you're referring to. And, I think one of the things that we've been trying to do on this project is to, I'm just trying to go to the view here just so we can sort of see the overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, I want to first say thank you very much for all the comments. I tried to write all the notes down. I'm not that sort of fast, but
Well,
very thoughtful comments all throughout, and we're looking forward to
you can listen to it.
Yeah. The one of the pieces that we've worked hard on, and I think it really goes to sort of some of the kind of reasoning, I think, or sort of aspect of behind. So the unit plans and the actual units are critically important to actually the architecture on the exterior, and that is something that is in here that not always occurs. And so, the larger glass windows on the Cambridge side are actually in the public rooms of each of the units.
Yes.
And then the smaller unit, the double windows, are in the private, like the bedrooms or sort of the second bedroom. And so, it's a really interesting sort of aspect of the plan informing the architecture and the architecture informing the plan. And those two really are working in concert together. And what we found was that it really then started to create this beautiful movement and flow on the windows. And the larger windows, you can see sort of how they step and move with the architecture and also with the building. And it became a fairly bold move, which I appreciate, Mark, you saying. But we also wanted it to feel delicate and refined. And I think what we see in this elevation is sort of those things coming together and creating an architecture that is bold and powerful, just in the nature of it, but then has this sort of delicateness of the frames and the folds and the curvatures coming together to create what we think is just really an elegant moment. And I think it's fairly intentional in terms of us trying to ensure that the architecture feels like it's in response to sort of the buildings around it, but it's actually has its own identity, and it's not going to get lost in sort of just the sort of the adjacent aspects of it or what have you. And so I think you're hitting on these great moments that we've been working through, and you can appreciate we probably have some other sort of iterations of this kind of edge and this condition. But I think it is quite a powerful piece of architecture, but we think it does also have a respect and a sort of an elegance that is, we believe, kind of responsive to Beacon Hill. And I think the mullions.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that, I think the mullions. We've had mullions on the building. I'll just be like, let's just we've looked at it with mullions. We've looked, and in a way, it took away from sort of the elegance of the building. And we're envisioning these as operable, not the large pane, obviously, but there will be operables, and there'll probably just be an awning of some sort at this point. And what we found was the additional mullions just felt so additive.
No, it's going to be they're going to be decorative. It's not going to it's going to diminish your idea.
Yeah.
You have all I was commenting on was I was a little bothered by the curve.
Yep. I appreciate that.
That's all. I really love I really love the dynamic movement. I mean, the variety of visual experiences, as I was taught in design school years ago. I mean, it's there in this facade. None of the variegated vertical structures looking stacked, but the windows behind, some solid, some void. You know, I think it's such a leap forward. I think you'll do fine refining it. I wouldn't go into working drawings with it tomorrow.
No, we won't. And then Mark, you know, I think just touching on your kind of comments, which I think are great. And, you know, oops, I was trying to go back to those. This notion of sort of the freeze line and the transition line and the cornice line, we've actually had it in a couple different ways. And we actually did have a sort of larger moment that sort of highlighted that transition in a color. And it really did exactly what I mean, it sort of took away from this sort of idea of kind of the sculptural building above and then the sculptural building below. It almost crossed a line, if that makes any sense, in terms of like, it became a foreign object on the upper part of the building that was framing something that just didn't quite feel right, I guess, when we were looking at it. But I can promise you it's something that we've been trying to understand. And, you know, we sort of settled on this a little bit more minimal approach in terms of the double soldier course and that sort of edge condition being tight and taut. And I think it's something that we've, you know, I'd love to sort of think more about, but I think it was good. Yeah.
And I will say, go ahead, please.
I was going to echo Eric's comments. I mean, this building would be kind of enough of a challenge in terms of serving two masters, insofar as Charles Street and Cambridge Street are really so dissimilar in context, and then this challenge is compounded by the piano curve of the building lot. And so the undulation of the upper floor is a means of trying to resolve the geometric argument between the storefront footprint, which we're unable to do anything but obey, and the upper floors, which, you know, previously had what I think everyone will remember as a really kind of problematic cantilever, and you know the undulations, moreover, respond to the urban geometry of Charles Street and reflect the Whitney and the T station, and also really are in some ways an inverse of the masonry bays that one sees frequently on the hill. And it's also been suggested that they suggest the rippling waters of the Charles River. So we see this as a response to a very challenging context, and yet at the same time, a hinge, as this is, between Charles and Cambridge, needs to be taut and crisp and firm, and hence the masonry detailing that you see, and you know, borrowing from the strength of the materials of an entirely brick facade, we are seeking to express the inherent qualities of of this challenging site, and really to embrace its constraints to present something that's very, very elegant and distinctive, and that is very much a response to site conditions that don't exist elsewhere on the hill, and yet which are perfectly responsive to the site. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Yeah, let me just to clarify one thing. I do not for a moment think you should decorate it as a birthday cake, as my colleague Commissioner Feingold said. Just to be clear, and I appreciate that the tension here, and I do very much appreciate the notion, and I think you're a long way there. That rather than simply try to copy or even just reflect its neighbors, it stands out as there's nothing else quite like it, and there's plenty of references and material and color and scale and proportion to I think the history that's come before it architecturally in the community. So I appreciate that it wants to be something of its own time. I think candidly the hope is that 50, 100 years from now, people still say, "Oh, this is a really great building," and they know, "Oh, that's a great example of early 21st century architecture," in the same way that we would of our many earlier examples that are emblematic of great architectural style and so forth. So I'm not suggesting you add a lot of ornament or decoration and so forth, because I realize that's counter to the directly counter to the high level intention here. I was just suggesting, can we worry some of these details a little more, so that they might you might get an even stronger result from your intention than you have already. That's all.
I would say
Thank
yes, yes, please. Yeah, I mean, I think worrying about them is something that we're doing, and I think, but your comments are very well sort of understood and received, and I think we appreciate it. Yeah.
As architects, we all worry about the details.
Yeah. Thank you. I can't agree with you more.
Right.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna, anything more, I'll repeat myself.
Well,
Thank
let me
you.
ask.
Thank you. I think it's a huge leap forward.
Yeah, let me just ask a couple of clarifying questions. It sounds like we've got, as maybe expected, a bit more work to do. But I think there's consensus certainly around that it's a big improvement. It's a good direction. It's quite thoughtful design. Let me just ask to try to give the applicant as much further direction as possible. We did not talk about, it's very much a secondary facade. And again, as we clarified earlier, you can't really see it from anywhere but in this alley, very much up close. But this silver place, forgive me, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Can we just give a little bit of attention? I don't mean to prolong this, but did anyone have any commissioners, any further feedback about this? Understanding, of course, that you'll only see this from that short stretch of Charles Street or when you walk down there, but you can see it, and the applicants obviously put a lot of work into this. So is there anything that we find that concerns us about the treatment of this? Well, let's just call it rear facade, for lack of a better, the Silver Place facade. Either the facade of the building itself or the walkway, which would obviously get an improved treatment as well in the process.
I didn't see the detail of the walkway.
Mark, it's pretty dark. Is it going to be lighting in it? Do you know? Do we know?
Yeah, so there's I'll let the architect.
Yes. Here, can you, maybe it's a little hard to see it. I can try to zoom in. Or not. Yeah, I'm struggling here. Sorry. So on the bottom here is the treatment for the Silver Place. So we are intending to take out all the and introduce a granite paving with a brick infill. We did think about bringing in lighting, and at this, phase, we were thinking about some cantonary or string lighting that would kind of span between with some kind of a decorative fixture. We haven't quite got there, if I'm going to be totally honest yet, but I think, no, it's important to be a true residential entry sequence for the residents of this building, and as well as the sister building to our south that has residential entrance to it. So we will envision that whole space.
Well, you have lights in every one of the X's, don't you?
That's what we have. Yes, correct. Shown currently, correct.
Well, they're shown it in the some perspective you had.
They do show up a little bit in the perspective.
Oh, I didn't see any. That's.
Can you show that?
Yep, I'm going to try to get there. Hopefully, I can go
colleagues will. There you go.
So, and I think there was a comment. There was a comment about these being not traditional, or that's. I think that we understand. They're just shown it, but that is our intent to. We thought it'd be nice to carry it across and be more in the middle, but there could be building mounted lighting as well. I mean, I think there's a variety of ways to think about that, but
yeah.
Yep.
But it would be nice walkway, and you light it appropriately eventually.
Yeah.
That's the intention, certainly.
It'll need to be lit probably during the day too.
Yeah,
it's pretty dark in there. Yes,
it is pretty dark in there. There's no question. I agree with that, and yeah.
Well, one other quick thought, which it appears you've taken this up already, but I just want to stress, and I think Nick had a comment to this effect in his staff recommendations with respect to the signage. I think another aspect of the ground floor that's going to be really important is the signage, because left to its own devices, which is to say, if you just let tenants put up whatever they might want, that I think might detract a bit from, maybe a lot from, all of the thoughtful attention you've given to this important, critically important space. And so I think having a sort of plan for the signage and how you treat it architecturally is going to be really important. And obviously you've already gone a long way to doing that. And I guess maybe to say it very directly, that you should, I believe, dictate where the signs are going to go, and at least at a high level, what they're going to look like in your plan, so that doesn't wind up getting spoiled later, after you've moved on from the project, and you have tenants moving in and so forth. If you follow me there.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we actually heard, through the community process was the CVS has stickers on all the windows, and there's no eyes on the street, and so I think we're certainly, and not necessarily saying this is there quite yet, but we do want to manage the signage on this building for certain, and our client Ageria is lockstep with us on that. So I think this was an attempt to really probably show the amount of signage kind of for the signage code in terms of the areas that are allowed for this, but I think we're trying to create a sort of signage package that is consistent and makes sense on this building.
It would be consistent, if I may, with my comment about sort of walking down Cambridge Street and feeling like you're engaging in the historic district. If you begin here you're showing a wall, a wall bracket sign, right?
This one here, yeah.
And if there were a series of those beginning on Cambridge Street and wrapping around, that would,
I see. Mm-hmm.
That would be a very good signal of what's expected, and you would feel engaged right away with the graphics of Charles Street.
Yep.
Yeah, and another opportunity to add a little texture there as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a detail that the chairman's comment on, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm supporting him.
Thank you. William, did you want to say something? I'm sorry, I think I talked over somebody. Was that you, William?
Well, I was just going to say I think in some measure, the tenant selection and certainly the number of tenants will determine a lot of the signage. But we certainly did want to indicate some of what we regard as the naturally or appropriately occurring signage vehicles that the building offers to tenants and contributes to the design with the blade signs on the piers and the pendant signs from the soffit, and those would certainly offer the possibility of some integrated lighting as well.
Right. Yes, very good. One other point I just wanted to make, because I forgot to make it at the outset, just more of a technical housekeeping thing. Just to clarify for the record, the applicant has received zoning approval for this design. There is one aspect of this which remains unresolved, which again, we appreciate given community feedback and so forth. You've significantly reduced the cantilever, but since we're looking at this conveniently this angle, we would understand that there is still a portion of the building that overhangs the property line. And Nick has very helpfully looked into this, and there will be a further approval evidently required from the Public Improvements Commission. But they have told Nick that they just want to do it once on the final design. We're not anticipating an issue there, but you know, sometimes if there are unresolved additional approvals, we will decline to hear an application. We have decided to hear this notwithstanding that additional regulatory detail, because the building has passed zoning, and we do want to move it along. And so I just want to state for the record at this point that any approval we make of this will likely just need to be contingent on getting the final sign off from the Public Improvement Commission. And so I just want to signal that to the applicants as well.
Understood and appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Correct.
Great. Well, okay, so I hope this has been helpful. As predicted, I don't think we're in a place to approve a final design yet, but I think we're certainly making good progress. To the applicants, do you have any further questions of us that would be helpful in further clarifying what we'd like to see in a revision?
I do not, but I can only speak to myself and my notes, but I don't know if Ruthie or Alex is also on from our office too. I see you, Alex. Now
Alex.
that I think we'll probably certainly go back and listen to the hearing and sort of
Right.
take some more notes of that. But I'm fine. Ruthie, Alex, I'll defer. William, the team.
Okay, well, thank you again for all of your, for a very thorough presentation, a very thoughtful design, for being particularly so considerate of the what must be a large amount of and quite diverse, perhaps even at times conflicting input from the community, maybe even from this commission in our earlier advisory review, but we very much appreciate it. We think you made great progress. We look forward to seeing another iteration. And with that, I will move that the application be denied without prejudice, so the applicant be given leave to make further refinements to the design in keeping with the comments made by the commissioners this evening.
I second that.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, well, it's 8 o'clock. That's not too bad. Long hearing, but appreciate your patience, everyone. And again, thanks for the thoughtful presentation. We're very much looking forward to seeing the next version as we move this closer to completion.
Thank you.
Well, thank you,
very
everybody.
much.
Appreciate the comments.
Thank
We look
you.
forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, William. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so we are almost done here. We've got a couple more things administrative, I think. Yes, I will note for the record, I intend to recuse myself with respect to 36 Beacon. Any other recusals, comments, questions, concerns about any of the administrative review items?
No, I read them. That's fine.
Okay, Would anyone like to be heard? Public comment on any or all of the administrative review items? I see Rochelle's got her hand up.
Rochelle, go ahead.
Got a comment on that?
Beacon Hill Civic Association for just 145 Pinckney Street, Unit 405. We oppose this application as the HVAC equipment is visible from a public way and does not satisfy guideline A9. Upper floor HVAC units, which have been approved, are on the 5th and 6th floors and are shielded from view by the cement deck floors and the viewing angle from a public way, shielding which progressively lower floors do not have. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Anyone else?
Not seeing any other public comment, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Nick, just for the edification of our colleagues here, this is River House.
Yes.
It's another AC on the porch. You want to just give us a little more your thought process on this one?
Thank you. Yeah. So Rochelle is correct. This is on a lower floor. My thought process is that we've approved 3 of these before, and all of them have been below the railing. And it was my interpretation that because it's below the railing, it has a very similar visibility and would look simply, as long as it's the right color, which it's being proposed as the right color, it would simply look like, if there were deck furniture out there. So seeing as though, you can certainly see, and that wasn't part of the conversation when we approved those, the level of well, that wasn't a key contributing factor, I should say, because they're all certainly visible from areas in our purview. But I put it on administrative review based on the fact that we've approved them before. And just reminding you, you do have the ability to pull it and ask the applicant to come appear before us at the next hearing in March.
Right. Okay. Thanks. That's very helpful. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm happy to bring up the drawings. Sorry, I'm happy to bring up the images if that's helpful.
Commissioners, do you want to see them? I mean, I think I'm satisfied with Nick's explanation.
I'm satisfied as well.
Yeah, I think it's these things are visible, but to me, I've always come back to it's visual impact, not just visibility that we care about. And I think I have concluded in general that the visual impact of these things on the porches of this particular building, just these things on these porches on this building, not other equipment in general, but the visual impact is pretty minor.
I agree.
Arian, are you okay with it staying on administrative?
Well, yes, I suggested that just after you did.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry. You can tell I'm tired. Forgive me. You did. You just said that. You literally just said that. Sorry. Okay. Anyone else? And anything else on administrative?
They do a vote.
Okay. I move that the administrative or anyone want to make a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes, recuses himself with respect to the item application 26.0580 BH, which is 36 Beacon, and votes aye with respect to the balance. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, administrative items are approved. Thank you very much.
Great.
In a minute.
So some quick staff updates and just making sure that all the commissioners are paying attention. So we had our 50th anniversary celebration last week. Thanks to those that came. It was a great success. For those of you that did not get one of our commemorative posters, just let me know. I'm happy to drop one off to you. Also, just to let you know that our office will be sending out nomination letters to the nominating bodies for either your reappointment or someone to replace you. So please talk to your nominating bodies about getting you either reappointed or someone to replace you. So those will be going out and sometime soon if they've not gone out already. I did see the Civic Association nomination form on Joe's desk over there, so that one may have not gone up. But if you'd like to be renominated, we have to interview everybody that we receive resumes for. But if you'd like to serve, continue to serve, and you're able to serve, just grab a renomination from your nominating body. And that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Nick. For those who weren't able to make it, I highly recommend, if you have a chance, to go over and check out the new Office of Historic Preservation space where Nick now works at 26 Court Street. It's quite a beautiful renovation they've done to that great old building right across the street from City Hall. So I hope that will be one of many events that we'll get to attend there. It's very cool. I recommend it.
Well, I will say that it will probably be our hearing room if and when we go back to
right.
in-person
Yeah.
hearings. Yes.
Right.
So you will have to come here. And if anyone would like a tour, including members of the public, just give me a shout and we can schedule something.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Anything else? Any other business? Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Is that at the beginning of the minutes?
Sorry?
No, we did that at the beginning.
We did it
Oh,
beginning. Yeah.
sorry, I missed that. Sorry, guys.
Yep, we're good. Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Yeah.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Great. Thank you for a very productive meeting. And I think it was reasonable amount of time given what we had. So thanks for your patience and happy rest of winter. See you next time.
See everybody.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night.